OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Alright, very welcome along. It is Monday morning. We are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Colum's here.
Morning, Ger.
Shane is here.
Good morning, how are things?
Byrne used to have this thing where in the pre-show, when he'd be meeting the guests in the green room, he'd be like, is there anything now you don't want to talk about? And then straight off the bat, he'd go straight in, twist a knife, and everybody would be like, oh my God. Shane, you played some football at the weekend.
Very good. Yeah, we unfortunately lost our Premier Cup final in the Cavan Monaghan League to Glasgow Villa. Congratulations to them. 4-0 at the weekend, so it was a bit of a drubbing in the final. Really hot day. How
did you play though, more importantly?
A very average game. If I was to give myself a performance ranking, it'd be certainly in the red. As a team, generally we'd be in the red, but we've a young team, nice mix of youth and experience. We'll be back next year. We'll be back.
You're captain?
Yeah, win or learn, lads.
Did you send an inspirational quote to the team afterwards?
Or an apology?
Probably should have been an apology.
Did you not tweet an apology? On your Instagram was full of the stuff in the build-up to it. I mean, I knew all about it. Colin somehow missed them. But
I'm not one of these shite-hawk Premier League footballers that puts up a fake apology and sorry to the fans and the team and we'll do better. That's a load of crap. Just accept that you weren't good enough on the day. Take your bad performance and move on. Don't patronise everyone. Do you know?
It was a weekend of ends, of conclusions. Shane searched for silverware. Ryan Tubridy.
Oh yeah.
Finished. Soccer AM after 28 years. Last ever show on Saturday. Jeff Stelling finally leaving Sky Sports. Done. End of the Premier League. End of the URC. French Open started for the first time without Rafael Nadal since his debut 2005.
Whoa.
And the finale of Succession.
Oof.
Which happened last night. Question is, are we doing this week?
I mean, what does everybody want?
What do people want this?
Yeah,
we'll
do it on Wednesday. So you're looking at Wednesday.
Yeah. Is that okay?
The last
for people?
half an hour of the show at least.
I think the last portion of the show, and we'll give you loads of warnings. Spoiler alerts.
Full spoilers.
Yeah.
Right, so I have to catch up before
Wednesday. Yeah. You've got a bit of work to do. Yeah,
it's a lot of work.
I mean, you didn't mention the Cork hurlers going out there.
Well, unfortunately, that's reserved for the Gillette Labs.
Okay, so you're not going to mention it. All right. A reminder: OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. Here's what's on the show between now and 10 o'clock. Keith Wood's going to be our first guest at 8. We'll have the performance rankings before that. Rob Tanner's going to talk to us about Leicester, who are down. Big Sam's gone too. Oh, poor Big Sam with his giant head. Literal and physical and metaphorical, rather. Sports news at 8:45. Sarah Dunn have been talking hurling at 8:50, Anthony Moyles at 9:10, and then a clip from the Sunday paper review to play you out this morning. But let's get straight into it. Unless there's anything else you want to talk about, sir.
No, go ahead.
Time for the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it acceptable to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. Our performances was just lacked that intensity.
Boom. Right.
Starting in the red, lads. I'm just going to wait till it goes up on screen. Leicester and Leeds.
Exactly, you've forgotten.
Exactly, yeah. That's my subtle way of doing it, but now I'm called out. Everton's 1-0 win. Sadly for Leicester City and for Leeds United, sends them tumbling to the Championship. You'd imagine Dean Smith won't be in a job for too long. The talk in Leicester is that he's going to move on and maybe they look elsewhere. And you saw the scenes at the King Power Stadium at the weekend, and it was just a goodbye from essentially the entire squad. You saw Madison, you saw Vardy as well, as you'll see on screen there, and they were all just saying their little goodbyes. I'd imagine this Leicester first team squad is going to look drastically different next season to how it looks this season. Brendan Rodgers, of course, sacked back in April. Dean Smith comes in and fails to keep the 2016 league champions up. When you think about that, lads, in the last number of years, Colin, you were saying it before the show, the FA Cup win as well, the Champions League run they had, and now to add this into the mix, Leicester fans have had a roller coaster.
Leicester City have absolutely no business being relegated. This is like the West Ham team from 2003 that went down with all that talent, Joe Cole and Michael Carrick. Like, if you were away for the last decade, Matt Damon style, the Martian, he himself is a Leicester City fan, and someone gave you a run through of what happened even in the last 7 years. It is absolutely insane.
Is he really a Leicester City
what happened
fan?
To Leicester City? You know, to win the league, the following season to reach the Champions League quarter final, Beating Sevilla in the last 16, losing to Atletico in the quarters, winning the FA Cup for their very first time 2 years ago, 2 consecutive 5th place finishes. They finished 8th last season. Brendan Rodgers was talking about how we're going to build in the summer, and he just came back a different man altogether. If you look at the stats even, they scored more goals than anyone else in the bottom half of the table. Anyone else. They scored the same number of goals as Aston Villa, who qualified for the Europa Conference League, and they're gone down. As Barney Renee put it in The Guardian this morning, it's like the best way to describe this Leicester City team going down is like they forgot not to get relegated. They just sleepwalked into it. They thought, this won't happen. They won 4 games in a row last autumn. Relegated sides don't win 4 games in a row. Then they went through a spell between February and April where they didn't win anything.
Would Brendan Rodgers have kept them up?
I don't know. I would say,
wasn't it?
Possibly, yes. It's a bit like Graham Potter at Chelsea. If he had stayed put, would they have had such a terrible end to the season? Probably not. And because of Rodgers' ability as manager, but he was done at Leicester.
Potter,
he had no motivation left.
Potter, I'm not entirely sure. I think his motivation would have been not to have relegation from the Premier League with this crew on his CV, because I think that's difficult for him. Like if he'd kept them up and the Spurs job was still available, everybody would just be saying, oh, well, okay, Now it feels like he can't get the Spurs job for whatever reason, even though he's very well qualified for it.
Maybe not, but I mean, Eddie Howe took Bournemouth down. He got the Newcastle job. Like, there is ways back, and there's enough.
That was
goodwill.
Big break between that,
But Dean Smith,
a big break.
And the other thing about Eddie Howe taking that team down was they were nowhere near as talented as this squad. So, he hadn't presided over that team winning the FA Cup and narrowly missing out twice on Champions League qualification.
Well, I mean, so it's just as well for him. He left, so he didn't take him down.
Yeah, but the team is stained now. Dean Smith couldn't interrupt the pattern of what had been established under Brendan Rodgers. It did feel like Brendan Rodgers would have been able to talk them into believing a bit more than Sean Dyche, over the last 5 weeks, because Everton were not very good.
Well, Dean Smith said after the match, he said, when I took over, I said 11 points is what we need for me to probably keep this team up, and he was right. They got 9 points in that period, and 2 more would have kept them up on goal difference ahead of Everton. So you look at that the Leicester squad now, 8 players out of contract. Tielemans, I think, is one of them as well. So there's just a rake of them. Too many goals. I think the last clean sheet, they got the clean sheet against Newcastle last week on Monday, but that was
November.
Yeah, November was the last one before that. So I mean, that's relegation.
And going into yesterday's game, they'd won one of their previous 16 games. So the last third of the season was a complete disaster. But you mentioned Tielemans, Harvey Barnes, James Maddison, even Jamie Vardy still has a Kelechi Iheanacho is a Premier League worthy striker.
They're all gone.
And they're gone down. Are
they all gone?
Well, they're all going to leave the club, I'd imagine. I can't imagine any of those.
I can see Vardy staying put at his age. He loves Leicester.
Possibly, yeah.
1 or 2, but I mean, whether they're going to come back up, whether Leeds are going to come back up straight away, I have my doubts.
Leeds, Sam Allardyce's comments after the match would concern you. He was basically saying this club needs a lot of changes, and he was like, they're going to struggle in the Championship.
Nothing to do with me.
Nothing to do with me, basically.
I was just observing the rest of you.
He was wiping his hands. Goals need to be scored, and he pointed out that you need goal scorers to score goals, and the recruitment just hasn't been there at the club over the last while. He basically saying over the next few days he's going to sit down to the board. He wasn't ruling out staying on.
Wow.
Tactic.
He's going to say that, of course, but I mean,
well, look, if Leeds keep Sam, they deserve everything that's coming their way.
He did the classic in the press conference afterwards of a departing manager. Said, "Oh, look, they tried very hard. I wouldn't criticise their effort. Yeah, they was number 1, and then number 2 was, but ultimately they're just not good enough. Kick them when they're down, Sam."
The scenes in the stands as well. Leicester City fans started battering each other. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh no, I didn't see that.
Yeah, there was a group. It was obviously a small group, but just at one point battering the heads of each other. And then the Leeds fans were probably the loudest in voicing their disapproval at the team.
That's because Lucas Moura just jogged through them all in his last kick of football for Tottenham.
Nature of the game.
Scored a 4th goal.
At least Leicester did what they had to do on the final day. They got their win against West Ham, so they went down with a bit of a bang. Leeds go down with a whimper. That performance, generally speaking, was just atrocious against Spurs.
They conceded 29 goals in the last 9 games, Leeds.
Again, would Marcelo Bielsa still be a Premier League manager if he'd stayed at Leeds? And I realise a lot of water under the bridge in the meantime, but if they'd just ridden out the bad period he was having, or
I
don't think Jesse Marsh was going to keep them up. I don't think there was any difference really between what they got.
Would Marsh have kept Leicester up? Because Marsh's talks with Leicester, if you remember, before Dean Smith took over, broke down. No?
It's hard to tell the difference between Marsh and Dean Smith. There's just not enough of evidence from Marsh.
Well, Dean Smith has had a successful...
so the Smith appointment was fair enough.
I suppose, does Marsh get the credit for... Smith had a whole season where he kept a team in the Premier League.
So I don't think there was... I think going for Smith over Marsh is fair enough.
It must be tough though for any Irish fans watching this morning or listening. Like, if you're a Leicester fan or a Leeds fan or a Southampton fan, it must be quite sad watching your team go down, because you don't actually know how long it's going to be before you're in the Premier League again. Like, if you're Leeds right now, you're looking at that squad going, they're not going to be back next year. Leicester,
I don't think they will.
Leicester potentially, depending on how they recruit. At least they will recruit.
With respect, you've put some team in the green later on who nobody expected to be able to get back up, whose squad is nowhere near Premier League ready. So you guys pronouncing immediately that they're dead forever, I don't believe it. There are parachute payments to come. They are actually properly established clubs with good facilities and great stadiums, which it turns out even Luton don't have. So I ain't writing any of these teams off.
I'm not saying forever.
No, but Coventry look good. Middlesbrough under Carrick look really good. Like, there's clubs in the Championship that are going to have 1 or 2 years with really good managers.
That's your Man United nonsense coming through again.
Well, Carrick took over and they're in the relegation spots, weren't they? And then they took them to almost promotion.
Yeah, it's been the world's most difficult league, where loads of teams who were just badly managed with a modicum of good management managed to surge up the table and reach the playoffs. That does not speak of an amazing league with loads of quality at the moment. It just doesn't.
I did understand why Bielsa left at the time. It did feel like it's run its course, but I felt like a little break, Ross and Rachel style, where they agreed on it. And then I always thought he should have come back after Jesse Marsh. I usually be against going back, but I thought Bielsa and Leeds is such a good fit, like the way Pochettino and Tottenham was. I always thought Pochettino just needed a 6-month break off Spurs and could come back then. I think they missed a trick not going for Bielsa when he was free. He's the Uruguay manager now.
Frank Lampard is also, should he not be in the red after one of the worst? In fairness, they managed to get a result from that wasn't a crushing defeat in the last day of the season, and he get to speak after a non-defeat.
Another cut off them again, just like he did after the Manchester United game last Thursday. We discussed it on Friday morning on the show. Well, look, it goes to show that to kind of encapsulate Lampard's second stint as Chelsea manager, we often in the last few weekends have discussed the performance rankings of a Sunday, have suggested Chelsea and Lampard, and I think the consensus was, they're just irrelevant.
But it's over now.
No, definitely, it's definitely another shout. There are a lot of omissions today that could have got in, but Lampard, where does he go from here?
Where does he go from here?
Is a genuine question. Do you think he'll manage any side next season?
Not
any side next season.
You mean in any league?
Any league. Do you think he'll get a job?
Yeah, Leeds. You can easily see Leeds stupidly.
Do you think so?
Leeds are exactly the type of shotgun team that'll be like, we need something high profile that the American owners have heard the name of, and they'll be like, we know him. He's what's his track record like?
But he did get a championship side to a playoff final before.
Was Mason Mount playing on the team?
Part of the playoff, part of the championship's brutal, according to.
Well, I mean, it wasn't particularly rent in some players and take a mediocre side and put it in. Come on.
Even Aston Villa got out of the championship
there you
years ago.
A suggestion by Emma Carroll to put Aston Villa in the green today for both the Premier League and WSL seasons. On the Premier League side,
Unai Emery
must be absolutely thrilled.
Very close to
Conference League.
You just a little bit like, will they have the squad to manage? Like, they didn't have a squad to manage any cup runs this year, and he basically threw the tin hat at the cups, which was, it turns out, the right thing to do.
Villa probably are unlucky, actually. Yeah, when you think about it, Spurs did their job in the last day to get Europa Conference League, but Villa beat a good Brighton team, and then Rachel Daly, of course, banging in goals in the WSL as well. So good weekend for the club, Ger.
Yeah.
Roy Keane had one final cut off David De Gea before the season ended. I don't know if you saw that. He got awarded his Clean Sheets of the Season award, his trophy.
Golden Gloves.
United, United, that's the one.
Clean glove,
United players started patting him on the head. He was like, what's that? What are they patting him on the head for? They need to get rid of him. And then Mick Richards was like, what about all the clean sheets? He says, nah, not having him.
He's right.
Not good enough.
He's right. He is right. No,
he is correct.
Look, maybe Keane only needed control of a club where he had a budget to be able to get rid of players, or maybe he's just a world-class pundit and a terrible manager.
That is quite possible also.
Not an unusual combination.
Caoimhín Kelleher conceding 4 goals to Liverpool too.
Could have been in the red also, but I mean,
Nathan Collins, like just back in the team last week and then absolutely spanked on the last day of the season. But he did play the full 90 minutes, so you know. On the flip side, he got to see every one of those goals up close and personal. So yeah, he could easily win it. I do think, we just all joking aside, that the Cork City fans who were chanting about Stephen Bradley's son on Friday night should be in the red, and like anybody who is not reporting them or helping Cork City identify them, there is talk of lifetime bans from all activity, and Cork were out pretty quick with their statement. But like, this is completely unacceptable. It is absolutely disgusting, and the fact that Stephen Bradley is the one who had to come out and talk about it, and maybe that was just the way it happened in the sequence of events, but you would really hope that Cork get a handle on that quickly, and that they're the ones who are doing the investigation and finding the fans. And because you know, for a chant to be heard, it needs to be multiple people, and so that'll have been seen, and there'll have been some kind of people on the fringe going, oh, that's maybe that's a bit, but like, somebody knows something, and you really hope that they get identified quickly and prosecuted, whatever the full rigors of the law are. It's not just a ban, but like, maybe you can't put people in prison for being absolute disgusting people, but like, I don't know, this seems all right. So I've obviously gone too far with that, but they should definitely be banned for life.
That was pathetic. I think anyone who even thinks up a chant about a sick 8 or 9 year old kid is just sick in the head. And I think Cork City's response was quick, and as you say, if they can just pinpoint the fans and who they were outside the ground, I think they mentioned in the statement as well. But yeah, that's disgusting behaviour, so hopefully they'll be found and kicked out of the game. We'll move on to the other red this morning, lads, and it is going to be Cork Hurling column. I know you're not going to like this.
It's just Cork generally column.
Is that Cork? Yeah, we just put the county in there.
Yeah. What happened there?
Well, I mean, look, Limerick 325, Cork 130. Limerick roaring back, making a 5th straight Munster final as well, and sending Cork out of the championship. So 41,000 just under in the TUS Gaelic grounds as well, watching this one. Patrick Horgan hitting 114, but sadly for Cork it wasn't enough. The performance, probably and possibly their best of the championship so far, which is why, Colin, I know you're possibly going to argue that them in the performance rankings in red is a controversial one.
If anyone from the Munster side should be in red this morning, it should be Tipperary, who nearly blew it against Waterford.
Nearly though. Well, they lost the I suppose.
How can you put a side in red when they lost by a point to the two best sides in the country?
Well, like,
that's all they lost, like.
So Cork are out, right? But Dublin are still through, even though they coughed up a Wexford-esque lead against Galway. Are we still all like the Munster Hurling Championship is the best championship in the world, even though we now have a weakened All-Ireland series because everybody is fixated on the Munster Championship being the be-all and end-all? Are we sure this is the right thing to do, that Cork are gone, they're now also-rans, and there isn't even a goblet of minor prestige for them to lean into? No Tailteann Cup for them.
To be fair, they're the best team knocked out of the championship in years, aren't they?
Well,
they could have gone on to win
it's their earliest championship exit since 2001.
Yeah,
well,
22 years
in a calendar year.
Yeah,
obviously.
Yeah,
they've been beaten, earlier in the season.
Also against Limerick, but I presume we're putting them in red because it's so cruel.
I think
it's performance. Like, they were again brilliant yesterday.
I think we're putting them in the red because they're out, and actually, I'm not sure that the championship structures are as amazing as everybody says they are. Now, look, I'm definitely in two minds. I could easily be convinced that if this wasn't knockout, nobody would be going to the games because people don't really care about the title. But I don't know about that either. Like, everybody's showing up because they're hurling fans and they're watching the best hurlers in the country go against each other. Does it matter that, like, they're out?
I'd be interested to see what hurling fans think about the structure now, because I was chatting to Conor Gilligan at the weekend, and we were both of the agreement that we actually quite enjoyed the first round of the group phase and the football side of things, and I did not expect to enjoy the first round. I was like, this is only going to heat up when there's actual jeopardy at stake, but it turns out there is jeopardy in the first round.
I think the results have been so kooky that, like, all of a sudden you feel like anything could happen.
Yeah, makes it more interesting.
Yeah, and like, the best players playing a lot of games. Is that not what we want?
It's interesting.
Is it not mad that Dublin are in the championship? Like, no disrespect, but Dublin are in a different stage of evolution, although albeit new managers first season, blah blah blah. But like, Cork have been building an underage structure for the last decade and a half, last decade at least, and it looks like those players are finally starting to come through, and they have a little bit of strength, notwithstanding the injuries they have. It just feels a little bit unfair after the weekend and after the championship we've had. Now, sorry, Galway, who had won in All Ireland, were also knocked out in the last round of the round robin in the previous one before COVID. So like, they're not the greatest team ever to be knocked out in the round robin. I have to just want to have a little bit of a. It was Scales Galway, wasn't it, that team? So he wasn't defending himself, or maybe he will later on. I've only listened to the first half an hour of the Hurling pod so far. But
Cork, a victim of geography. It's awful. There's two comments here.
Cork victimhood
is interesting, right?
Hook it to my veins.
A victim of geography? What do you mean? Because they're in Munster, just?
Yeah, they're out now. Like, you know, we're down here, but like, as Ger's already alluded to, almost accidentally, the Cork shouldn't be out. Two comments here. Connor 1272. Cork are building something for the future. Under Pat Ryan, our time will come. But then John Claffey on the other side. How many chances do Munster teams want?
Well, I mean, the same number of chances as everybody else. It's just that now we don't have a championship where, like, Cork could legitimately be the best team in the country for the next 2 months. We'll never know. There is a possibility that they're getting better game on game. And before you tell me, oh, well, why didn't they win? Because they had Limerick away from home. The vagaries of it this year, they ended up with Limerick in an away game, and like, we do know home advantage matters, and certainly they got a fairly sweet penalty decision given. The home team did, the away team didn't. You know, this
so soft.
This stuff matters. So look, I don't know. I'm putting them in the red. They're out. That's the end of the season. I don't know if it's necessarily particularly fair.
No, it's the harshest red.
I think in my made up power rankings for 2024, I'm gonna have a little sniff of Cork to win the All Ireland.
Oh,
yeah.
You're giving Cork fans a bit of hope this morning, Ger.
Just think of the grudge they will be nursing for the next 11 months.
Grudge at who though? The structure?
Well, everything. The injustice of the world, the ungovernable sea.
They lost those games. They lost to Limerick. Like, you know.
But it's it's the performance. Like,
they did lose.
It's the performance.
But like, they have control over that. They don't have control over the structure. So cry about things you don't.
It was a brilliant match. Like, it was like the match of the weekend.
Yeah,
and they're in red.
And it was a very dodgy penalty against the 3-time / on verge of 6 All Ireland in a row.
Their shooting was 100% after 20 minutes. 11 points from 11.
It's not bad, is it?
Do you know what I mean?
The performance certainly the weekend wasn't in red.
I will say, look, the other side of it. In the second half, like, they were level at half time. They were only level once in the second half. They never went ahead, Cork.
Yeah.
And like, all the games really this year have been tight. So they're on the cusp of something. But like, the difference in mentality and feeling towards Cork between now and this time last year, like, it's a different world.
Pretty positive.
There's a lot to look forward to under Pat Ryan's side. Like, they'll be kind of the moral victors of the championship. You know, like,
that's what we all want, a moral victory.
When the quality of matches dissipate, everyone will miss a Cork. They should still be here at the party. They went home early.
Come on, we got to keep going.
Move on to Amber. We'll move on to Amber and the Gaelic football side of things. We just briefly mentioned Dublin and Monaghan are the teams that we've mentioned here in Amber for reasons I don't know really, but certainly from the Monaghan perspective, I don't know why they're in Amber, but I'll talk about that in a second.
Say a word against this last night.
Listen, I know, I wanted to save it for on air. It has more impact. Dublin, there was a point during the game where Jim Murtagh scores an unbelievable score off the left to make it 8 points to 4 in the first half. Goes to 9-5 for half time. You're thinking, Roscommon have this. Like, they're actually, Dublin aren't creating anything, and every time Roscommon come forward, they look like doing something dangerous. A bit of a fortuitous goal, I think, for John Small as well, the keeper. I mean,
was it legal? I wasn't sure. It was definitely. I mean, I'm not. Anyway, I guess they gave it. Again, hometown decisions.
Would have been harsh to possibly disallow it, but Cormac Costello, to be fair, had a brilliant game for Dublin throughout, especially in the second half.
Just not from place balls.
Yeah, just not from place balls, but certainly from play he was involved in a lot and kicked a few nice scores from
7 points in total, 2 45s and 2 frees. So, but did miss some frees, and you're like, are Dublin going to win All Ireland without somebody who's at like 95% in the All Ireland final? Basically, you're allowed to miss 1 as opposed to 2.
Was the free at the end? Sean Bugler puts Dublin 2 ahead, and then towards the end, Conor Cox earns the free. That's obviously brought forward to where the ball lands, and Donny Smith taps it over to earn Roscommon the draw. I don't know, was that a foul? There was a debate last night on the television on the Sunday game about that particular
there's no referee, and they never did that.
I know, not at all. But I think the reason that you won't hear about that is because the draw was a fair result. Roscommon certainly earned at least a draw from that game. Roscommon build on their Division 1 form as well.
I was feeling very cocky after last week about having the Dubs at number 1 in the performance rankings. I'm just not sure about it at the moment. I'm just not sure about it at the moment. Didn't feel like it felt like they weren't tuned in, and maybe they're periodising for a quarter final. They don't care who they play, quarter final, semi final, final. But like, now they've left it down to scoring difference. Whoever beats Sligo and Kildare by the most will get the home. We'll go straight through to the quarterfinal, and then you'll have to play week in, week out, and they have injuries. So Davy Byrne went off, and Kilkenny went off, and it looked like they had a really strong squad, but loads of those players who we thought were going to just come back and be in their old form aren't in their old form. So Dublin.
When did Dublin hit only 111 in Croke Park? Like, have you last seen that? Well, maybe it's happened recently enough, but certainly it doesn't happen too often. 111 for Dublin Croke Park. The body language after the match as well didn't look too positive from a Dublin perspective. You have to give credit to Davy Burke, because you could easily go to Croke Park and put in this defensive setup, and they just didn't.
Let me tell you. So Dublin won 11, Kildare 13 points in the league, and Dublin 14 points, Kildare 12.
Right, so that's very un-Dublin-esque.
Well, exactly. I think that's the point, is that the new Dublin ain't the old Dublin, and so they are. I mean, I might be looking at Mayo and Galway as my 1A this week when we have Tommy on later on in the week.
We also have Monaghan and Amber. Lovely Saturday evening in Celtic Park, by the looks of it, on Saturday night, and 14 points apiece it finishes. Monaghan probably had the game in their grasp, 3 points up at one stage in the second half, and then Gary Mohan gets a black card, so 10 minutes with a man less. And then towards the end, Shane McGuigan kicks an unbelievable free off the left to swing Derry into a 1 point advantage very, very late on, and Monaghan come forward with one last attack, and you're thinking, just one more score. And Carl O'Connell, who's been absolutely brilliant, he's in his mid-30s and he's so quick still, so fit, and popped over an unbelievable point to equalise for Monaghan. I think it's similar to the Roscommon game, probably deserved a draw. Monaghan have learned a lot from the previous Derry game, where they were tanked by 8 points.
It was like 8 points. They were lucky to get 8 points.
Yeah, for sure. Derry that day were just really, really good. Conor McManus had a knock, so he doesn't start the game at the weekend there. Comes on in injury time. Jack McCarran comes on late as well. They didn't start him.
So what does all this mean? Are Derry flaky? Did last week the Ulster final take too much out of them? Or...
Well, I was talking to someone within the Monaghan camp yesterday, and the idea is that Monaghan after that game realised fitness was the key. Derry were far fitter than Monaghan, so the last 4 weeks Monaghan have a chance to focus on fitness. It's not often you lose a game and your very next game is against the same opposition, and clearly Monaghan focused on things that Derry taught them that day. That's the one thing about Vinnie Corey, as he said about his team, they learn pretty quickly, right? And they focused on that and just changed the game plan, put in some faster players. Ryan McInnesby came home from Australia since that last Derry game.
Can you work on fitness in 4 weeks at this level? Can you do that?
You can probably put more of an emphasis on it in training. I would have thought.
Right, that's really interesting to hear that. Like
overrun game,
because you do your base fitness work in November, and that's it. You can never change it. You can never alter it.
I don't subscribe to that theory at all. Like, you can certainly change it in a few weeks. And there was a lovely moment in the second half where Rory Beggan kicks a 45 from the wrong side for a right footer, and he's getting absolutely slaughtered by the Derry fans, and just pops it over and gives it a little fist. So
we're not going to have a lot of time to get into the red here, but Barbalatza 83 asks the important question in the comments this morning: where are all the cocky South African comments this morning? Was an amazing night in Cape Town. We drank the Ferryman's dry. I don't know. Is the Ferryman's in Cape Town? Is it famous? Share us your stories of the sacking of Cape Town by Munster at the weekend, because Munster are in the green, right? I see somebody else earlier complaining, "Oh, why are Munster in the green? It's only reserved for Leinster, isn't it?" It's like, no, mate. They're literally. I don't. Maybe you're still gee-eyed from whatever you were up to in the aftermath of the game, and fair play to you. But Munster are indeed in the green.
Yeah, indeed. Someone had commented in the YouTube earlier saying we won't put Munster in the green because we only put Leinster in the green. But look away now, because you're wrong. Munster deservedly in the green. And look, if you were one of those Munster fans, I don't know how many made the trip. Was it 5,000? Quinny was saying on Friday that made the 12,000 mile trip over to Cape Town. What an experience you had, because 12 years without a trophy, and Munster so impressive on what looked like an absolutely atrocious pitch in Cape Town against the Stormers, and so many good performances. A 5-point lead at half time, 12-7, and Stormers come back into it certainly in the second half, that 14-12 lead, and you're thinking they're going to need something special here, Munster. But something special arrived. The lovely photo there of Keith Earls with the player on the player's shoulders, and it shows what it all means behind the scenes as well. R.G. Snyman was brilliant when he came in for Peter O'Mahony in that match as well. I think John Hodnett is getting deservedly a lot of plaudits for his performance too for Munster. And as I said on Friday, look, if Munster win this match, they're the only team to win a province or to win a trophy as an Irish province this year. So Irish rugby's not dead, lads.
It's a bit like the Arsenal and Manchester United's comparison. Who had the better season, Munster or Leinster?
I think Munster fans are much happier with their season than Leinster fans. and have had the better season. Do you know, like, you gotta take your medicine. You gotta swallow hard. It tastes disgusting, but it's good it's really good that there's now a proper rivalry, and Leinster will want to crush Munster next season, and Munster will want to show Leinster that this is a new order that's being established.
It's a remarkable turnaround. We were talking about the start of the Graham Roundtree tenure, that it was very disappointing, very underwhelming, followed on from Johan van Gran. Where are the improvements coming from? And even the mid-season slump, conceding 130 points in 3 games, it all seemed to change against the South Africa select side, Páirc Uí Chaoimh last
that was the big turning
winter,
point, wasn't it?
But even then, even in springtime, it looked like Champions Cup participation next season wasn't going to happen at all. So in the last few weeks, 6 games in a row, it's changed around big time. And like, not just Keith Earls, but you'd be delighted for Peter O'Mahony. And then the John Hodnett interview afterwards was one of the great comic timing moments of Peter O'Mahony's slow hand to the face as Hodnett starts off his interview with Nick.
Has he not done it himself though? Has he not?
Yeah, it's classic O'Mahony.
Has he not, like, okay?
Reminded him of himself, surely.
It is like one of your kids doing the same thing that you've done before, and you're like, oh no, I've passed it on.
Can't give out.
Yeah, look, we're going to talk Keith Wood about this in more depth in just a moment. We'll obviously have Quinny on later on in the week. But if you are a Munster fan who was at the game, give us your thoughts, and we'll keep reflecting on those very quickly. Tommy was in touch earlier on. Morning, lads. A few takeaways from what was an epic weekend of hurling. We've got the fastest game in the world. One referee makes all the decisions. We have instant replays. The 4th official could have a monitor pitch side for the ref in high stakes calls. It's dealt with quickly. Hurling is so fast. 2 refs are essential in today's games. Umpires should be experienced, assistant or retired referees to ensure good calls are being made. This is the other thing that's an excellent point, and the pressure is taken off the referees. But then the last one is, right, the GA should restructure the championship. Quality teams getting knocked out while Joe McDonough teams get through. They have their own comp. Carlow can technically win 2 All-Irelands in the same year. That's the winning argument here, right? Those teams are still through. Cork are out. It should be a playoff between Cork and those teams, and then Cork should have they should be punished for being the 4th best team, but they shouldn't be out.
But should the Joe McDonough Cup winners not be given that opportunity to?
Why though? This year they've won their All Ireland in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like, that was their All Ireland. That was the thing that you entered at the start of the year. Congratulations. What's the point in them going out and getting hammered next week?
It's extra motivation to perform in the Joe McDonough, isn't it? If you have the carrot in the end of the stick, that being the All Ireland participation.
But I don't know. I think it's tokenistic at this stage, that you'll get this thing even though you're nowhere near the standard of it because you haven't had a season in the league or 2 seasons in the league to get to the standard where you can be properly competitive.
Yeah, I can see arguments for both sides, to be fair. It's one of those awkward ones.
I can't see any arguments for it.
Well, I agree.
I'm not both sides in this, buddy.
No, but maybe the playoff gives both teams a chance. Like if the Joe McDonough winners have a game against Cork or whatever, yeah, it's hard to argue against that one.
Is this Monaghan FM? Far too much time spent talking about Monaghan, says JP Roberts. I agree.
What are you talking about?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because they're not relevant. Come on, move on.
Yeah, we got to go.
Drew the Ulster champions. Get out of it, lads. They're talking shite. Sorry. Rashida Adelecki, we should mention as well. What a performance from her the weekend. Smashed her own Irish record of 400 metres. She keeps just beating her own records. Posted the 4th fastest time in the world this year at the NCAA Championships in Austin. Only last month she broke the 50-second barrier for the first time, 49.9. So she's done 49.54 at the weekend. So she's just ridiculous. She keeps breaking records, most of them her own. So fair play to Rashida Adelecki, and well worth, I think I mentioned in the green as well this morning. The other element in green for us is Luton Town and Chelsea. Chelsea women's team, of course, because we mentioned the men's. Luton's story has just been unbelievable. So obviously the last time they were in the Premier League was it the first year of the last year before? Sorry, never really, since '92. Yeah. But the work that Rob Edwards has done. And that performance the weekend to beat Coventry City on penalties at Wembley, really, really impressive. You look at their stadium, and we were mentioning it before today, Kenilworth Road. You walk through a housing estate to get to the away end, and it's just bizarre and remarkable and brilliant. And to see that in the Premier League next year is going to be quite incredible. The game itself, like the collapse of their captain in the first half, Tom Lockyer, like you're thinking this is very concerning, but then he's taken off, and I think his parents came into the dressing room to him, and he watches the penalties from the hospital bed, I think, with all his heart monitors and stuff on. So glad he's okay. But the work that Rob Edwards has done since he came in has been amazing. So good to see them in the Premier League.
Jim Sullivan says, but Munster are only in the light shade of green. Lol. No, the light shade of green is the first ones. They were the first ones. That's how that works. There's no you're kind of only a little bit.
We started with Munster Munster green last night and did everything else.
I love the paranoia that you have that we're somehow trying to do this down, or bitterly, angrily. Somehow it ain't true.
Yeah, and the Chelsea that I mentioned, Chelsea beat Reading 3-0 in the WSL at the weekend. Emma Hayes, the job she's done is amazing. Sam Kerr gets 2 of those games, a 4th successive league title for them, and she's just taken them on to another level. So fair play.
4 minutes past 8. That is this week's version of the Gillette Labs Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of Off the Ball. Braeburn Coffee coming to an Applegreen store near you. New locations are popping up every month. Visit applegreenstores.com/Braeburn to find your nearest Braeburn coffee experience. After the break, Keith Woods. First, the Saturday panel talking Erling Haaland and Evan Ferguson.
Up front, this is a little bit tricky, so I've gone with Saka and Rashford, and I've left Salah out, even though I think Salah's been he's actually had a very good season on stats, and I think he's struggled with his strike partners compared to other seasons. He's gotten more assists, but he hasn't looked like Liverpool have chopped and changed up front. I don't think that's helped, and a bit like you say, he should probably be in the team, but I've gone with Saka as a fantastic footballer. I think Rashford, just the story behind his return to form, and then finally, obviously, I've gone with Evan Ferguson. He's just better outside the box. I've obviously gone with how do you spell his name? Haaland. By any metric, the standards, like
I was sending Johnny clips the other night of Haaland outside the box.
How was I blindsided after 51 minutes of the show this week by that punchline?
36 goals. Dan, where was I the other night? I wasn't actually even watching the game, and I was getting Haaland v Ferguson updates, and Ferguson hadn't even started. Then it was like he felt this need with balance. Oh well, Ferguson actually did 2 good things outside the box.
He actually had two great touches in injury time, in fairness to him, but Haaland did have one pretty good so that's it. They're good teams, very attacking, to be fair. Very attacking. Who's the manager then, actually?
Oh, Guardiola.
Well, no, I think we are all the respective managers. That's the point of the team. Just imagine your team.
Is Guardiola on Premier League? I'm not so sure.
Well, you could do the Zerbi, but then you have to play 4-2-4. You have to play a completely different.
I think Arteta's done better with what he has than Guardiola, maybe. But yeah, it's got to be Guardiola, I suppose.
OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball.
3, 2, 1, go.
Whether you're a Drive to Survive fan or Grand Prix expert, now you can stay up to date with the world of F1. The F1 Pod on Off the Ball with Chicago Town Pizza, the ultimate podcast for F1 fans. The F1 Pod will keep you on the edge of your seat. For the best insight and analysis, subscribe to the Off the Ball daily podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Coming soon, the F1 Pod on Off the Ball with Chicago Town Pizza. Formula 1? Yeah, we go to town on it.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Right, and delighted to say Keith Wood is with us. Keith, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very good, thank you. Very good form.
I was going to say, it's we don't really know how to do these post-match analysis where Munster have done everything that they're supposed to do and come away with all of the spoils.
They did. They came away with the spoils. It was a fantastic match, fantastic occasion, nerve-wracking, really. The way finals are supposed to be, I think, and to see them coming out at the end and coming out in that fashion, which was, getting a score that pretty much incorporated all the players for Hodnett to score in the corner, which was pretty fantastic. And then to see the touchline conversion, which, like, every single part of that worked well.
Where in the season, as we look back at the various turning points, where did this come from, do you think?
It's very hard. Look, doing a retrospective, it's very hard not to be retrospective. But I think an awful lot of it came from even the losing the games at the very start. I think it was the recognition that the backroom staff and Graham Rowntree had that the team weren't fit enough to play the style that they wanted to play, and they ended up having a much longer pre-season. And they pretty much gave up the first few matches. Now, I still think they expected to win those games. There were games they should have won and couldn't get it right. But I think the players were pretty much flat at the start of the season for the first 3 or 4 games, partly because of that level of training. But I think it's paid off at the end. And I thought that was going to put them under too much pressure for them to qualify for Europe next year, for them to get into the knockout stages for the URC. And then they jogged their way back from it. And I know I was listening to you just before the break, and I do think that South African game in Páirc Uí Chaoimh was something else again. I think it was an opportunity for Rowntree to really pick young Munster players and get them onto the field on a very pressurised situation that isn't that pressurised, because nobody expected anything from them. That they then performed so well, which was brilliant, and I think it gave an extra fillip to the more senior players, that there actually was strength and depth, that you could rely on different guys. And if I was to be really impressed by anything this year, and I have been impressed by all the coaches and Leamy coming in and Prendergast, and that's fantastic. We can talk about those again. But I actually think the selection was different this year. I don't know to what level of pressure the IRFU put teams under in their selection. I know that they have an influence. They just didn't seem to have much of an influence with Munster this year. And it looked like Rowntree picked whoever it is he wanted to pick. And he didn't rest on anybody's reputation. He picked players that he thought would do a job for him, and I think he's invested in youth. And I know they talked about the thousands that went down there. There is a reaction, a palpable reaction, irrespective of the result, but now enhanced by the result, that this is a Munster team that supporters can follow. That it had drifted away from what it was for a good few years, and now it seems to be coming back to something. And that isn't a guarantee of success, and it's still early days, but it's early days with a trophy in the cabinet, and that's pretty fantastic. So for me, I look back in the season to a huge level of surprise that they've got silverware. A huge joy that they have, and a huge joy for some of the players that have played that are now holding a trophy and have a trophy at the end of their careers, which is pretty astounding, and it's a great launching pad for all the new guys that are there.
John Hodnett is a name you mentioned already there, Keith, and there's just some moments where he makes the big carry early on, wins a penalty just after that first try from Stormers as well, and the try that you mentioned, not to mention his interview afterwards as well. He was just brilliant.
Yeah, look, Hodnett for me has got progressively better all along. He was, we were talking on this a couple of years ago when he came on the scene, and we were saying, come on, get him in. And then he picked up a couple of fairly long injuries, which kind of stalled the ball there for him. And his game when he came back for me was of an excellent standard, but limited. And it's grown as the season has gone along, and he has offered more consistently when he's played. But his aggression in the tackle has been essential. That low slung back row forward is and the impact that he has and the running that he has, and I have to say the sort of. Almost the clarity of being in the right place at the right time. I think the fitness as well is there. So he has, which has been a great joy, is he's played his best rugby in the last couple of months. It's coming to the standard that you'd want it to be at the end of the season. A lot of guys are wrecked at the end of the season, and I think in times past Munster were pretty wrecked at the end of the season, and they didn't look it, and they were pinned to their collar for a lot of that game. And look, you have to just be thrilled for him, because he's now putting his hand up, and I don't think you'd have said that even at the start of the season.
To just briefly go back to like staging posts along the way, I know it's a one-off game against South Africa, and it kind of in itself doesn't really matter or mean anything, but they sold out Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and it felt like it was kind of a reactivation or a reanimation of a fan base, because it was something unusual, and it I don't know, your point about the Van Graan era and how maybe the team and the fans weren't fully aligned with what everybody was trying to achieve, or there was just a bit of a blockage. It begins to flow away after that, and even just getting Leamy and Prendergast back, they're all little very important tokens, but like it's people who've gone off and done things the hard way and not just been given a job because you're a local former player who we're going to try and build up over the next few seasons. So they've done this in all these little different bits seem to add together to a whole that then is actually greater than the sum of its parts.
I do, and I don't think it's a finished product by any stretch of the imagination, and that's the other piece that's very encouraging, is that a lot of things went wrong this season. But if I go on to the Páirc Uí Chaoimh match, Munster's history, and not saying that the other provinces don't attach more or as much importance to their history, but Munster, it just seems to be folded in entirely. The matches against international teams are the ones that are remembered in history. And I can remember as a kid going to Munster All Blacks in '89 down in Cork, and it being the most astounding game to go and watch. And and being involved in a game there then against Australia 3 years later, I was on the bench 3 years later, and these were huge days, and they kind of reignited that element of it being something else. So I think it was great to have it back, have one of those international games back. To have it in Páirc Uí Chaoimh was phenomenal. And look, there is a big investment in Cork. There is a big investment around the province to try and bring up the structures higher. It's still at the start of that process, and it'll take a period of time. But I think Cork has been a bit disengaged because of being based in Limerick, and I think it did need to be based somewhere, and it did need an upgrade of all its facilities, but now it's going to be upgraded across the board, which is important. But to have it in Cork and to have that many people there was phenomenal, and it's something that has to be viewed again and again and again, because in not doing it, there's a gap. So I think that did kickstart an awful lot, but I also think a lot of the players responded incredibly well. And on that particular day, for me, it was a day that Ben Healy came out of his shell. I thought he played incredibly well. And for me, that's one of the few kind of downsides, is that it didn't quite kick on to him playing a huge amount for Munster, and he has only in the last period of time. And actually, I love his comments over the weekend that he is delighted that he's spent his time and he's had a medal at the end of it, and he was very gracious with it. But he heads off to play for Scotland, and notwithstanding any of that, we have to take some pride in that idea as well. And he's an international player now, but I do think that could have been a really interesting battle for Munster for the next few years. And actually, the way Graham Rowntree managed it wasn't a battle. It was complementary to both himself and Jack Crowley. And I thought Crowley was fantastic. That's the best game he's played for Munster, which is in a final, which is phenomenal.
Well, let's just talk about that, because a bit of pressure on him, you suspect, after last week. And I'm sure he's not thinking about the Ireland thing at all, but actually he has. It seems certainly he would have catapulted ahead of Ross Byrne on the basis of what we've seen in the last couple of weeks.
Well, what I've liked and disliked about Crowley was, like, he got his chance, and then it's hard to argue against Rowntree. He's kind of managed the players very well, but he was there as one of the guys in the line for the World Cup. He had to have been, because he's one of these young talents, and then he gets picked at 12 for a lot of the games that he starts with Munster, and that's quite hard. But it gets him in maybe without the pressure, and I do like that idea of having a player on the field that doesn't have to be the pivot, and I think that has managed to work very well. But in the last few weeks, and then when he did start at 10, I felt he was too deep. consistently too deep, which is not very understandable because of the pressure that you're under. You want to have enough time to make the right decision, to get the ball through your hands comfortably, to the place to where you wanted to go to. But in the last couple of weeks, again, how he's been managed, being picked and not being picked, and coming off the bench and playing in the centre, and a whole variety of different elements. He seems to have grown, and it hasn't detracted from him in any way, shape or form, whatever job he's been asked to do. He just seems to have got a little bit better. I think the drop goal a couple of weeks ago has given him the courage to maybe take a couple of more risks, and maybe the coaches have given him that allowance to be able to do it. But I didn't think he was as deep in this game, and he's far more of a threat. He's a fine footballer, but he looked calm, and it's quite amazing to have that sort of situation. We were talking about Ron O'Gara and La Rochelle last week, that a lot of the players there seem to be very calm, but I thought Crowley was calm, and without even thinking about it, there was a bit of a guarantee of a grasping of the mantle when he took that final kick, that conversion of Hodnett's try. I don't know what I wasn't thinking, but I just presumed it would be Healy would kick that one. And it wasn't, and it didn't seem to be up for discussion. And it isn't that he took it, it's that he absolutely nailed it.
Yeah.
And so they're all huge positives. And again, doing those in the finals with the sense of calm is pretty astounding.
Keith, I know this is a very difficult thing to quantify, but how much will the build-up and some of the things said and done in the build-up have played into Munster's hands? I mean, so
we're going to F you up.
Well, basically, the video, of course, from the Stormers VIP lounge, I think it was, celebrating Munster beating Leinster in the semi, and also this talk of Munster being in bonus territory. I think Jean Klein mentioned it and referred to it in a pre-match press conference, that they're not there just to make up the numbers and be happy with the final. So how much will that have helped?
A lot of matches are bonus territory, finals aren't. And I have to say, I think the pressure that was on Munster was pretty astounding because of the failure to perform in semis and finals over the last number of years. And so I think the pressure was on Munster. I know the comment about being in bonus territory was considered to be a bit patronising by the players and the management, and they weren't viewing it in that fashion. But irrespective of that idea, I actually think it was the total opposite. I think the pressure was actually on Munster to go out and deliver. And so for me, the most gratifying thing to watch was the pressure was on Munster. Antoine Frisch made an uncharacteristic hash of a pass. Don't shovel shit is the story. When you're tackled and you're falling, you don't continue doing what you were going to do. And there was no panic from Munster. And there was a composure for the whole game, And so for that, I think they took what was said about them and they used it exactly the way they should use it. And that bit of bitterness, there's no harm in that at all. And no, it's not something. It's something that can work from time to time, but it doesn't work all the time. So, but you take absolutely everything you can to get a result. So if it's perceived disrespect or whatever you want to do, or actual disrespect, use whatever you have, whatever tools you can put into the toolbox to get the job done. And I think that was done.
Can we get some specific thoughts on the front row? Because we've been told that Munster are going to win nothing until they beef up their front row. They need world-class injection of talent, and they managed to go away to a fever pitch Cape Town against a storied South African scrummaging team on a bad pitch and hold their own.
I thought the front row did incredibly well. There weren't colossal number of scrums. They were under pressure, but they were fine with the pressure. I thought they were a little bit lower than they have been, which is essential against South African teams, and especially when the ground is poor. Everything can collapse easily. I still think they need to improve, and that's fine, because there's been a change. There's tried to be a change there for a long period of time, and it's taking its time, more so in the front row than anywhere else. And there is a bit of a dearth of front row forwards. So They did far better than the past, I can tell you that, and they'll be thrilled to bits, because when you're playing against teams that are bigger and stronger and have that history of it, it'll be quite a terrifying place to go and get any result. And the result for the front row was proving a platform. I have to say as well that I'm going to go back to fitness. The fact that the ball was moved as well as it was, and I've been critical of Archer often because he tends to give away an awful lot of penalties. I thought he had a fantastic game, and I love that fact that I think he's fitter as well. But I also think the importance of the day didn't affect the players; it helped them and enhanced them.
One last one.
Sorry, go on.
Queenie's been talking about John Klein's form for months, saying that he must be in the Ireland selectors' thoughts at this stage, and there's been no sign of it. But the extended squad is named this week. Has he reached a point now where you'd have to be thinking about him? At least, like, the improvement has been so significant that if he could actually have the extra improvement with the extra coaching at Ireland, then maybe he might be an option for them for the World Cup.
I'm not sure. I think he has limited some of his errors by not doing certain things. And even if that sounds a bit negative, it isn't negative. I used to describe Jason Leonard as one of the best forwards of all time, because what he did better than anybody else. But it was the things he didn't do. He didn't try and pass the ball too much. He never tried to pop pass. He never tried to be a handler in any way, shape or form, because he wasn't any good at it. And I think Klein, for me, has stopped doing as much of that because it puts him under more pressure. But what every team needs is a guy who's willing to do all the grunt work and the really heavy lifting. And he has done an awful lot of that this year. And so whether that's something that Ireland will say is useful, and I think it is useful actually, I think it is something that's important. But if you want every single player to be able to do every single thing, then I don't think he gets into the squad. But on the basis of what he's actually able to consistently do and do really well, I think he's a guy you can rely on.
Okay, so it'll be up to them to decide what role that's going to be. One last thing then, like the squad's going to be named. They'll have a couple of weeks holidays. They'll be back very soon, and then it's all World Cup all the time between now and whenever we exit the World Cup, at whatever stage that might be. Last week, after Leinster being beaten by La Rochelle, I did not feel particularly happy about where we were, but I feel much better now about the fact that there's going to be an influx of players who've just won a big game away from home, who'll be swanning around the place in training, rubbing it in their Leinster teammates' faces for at least the first few days, and just bringing a little bit of extra spice, a little bit of extra competition to it. Really, like, fever pitch competition for the 10 spot. If Sexton doesn't make it, if Sexton does make it, for the backup for game time, and all of a sudden I just feel a little bit better about life.
Well, look, I think Munster have to celebrate it. Firstly, it's been a long time without a trophy, and they do need to celebrate it. And I think that's very important. I think a lot of the writing off of Ireland after Leinster's loss last weekend was wrong and off the mark. And I do think they need the break. All these guys need the break of this constant talk about rugby and about World Cup, because once they come back into camp, it's about getting back into this idea of delivery, and the pressure that goes with it. But I'd go back 4 years ago and say that the players going into camp at that time were tired. We're tired of the season that they'd had. We're tired of some of the losses that they'd had. And it was pretty much at the end of the tenure. And I think they had realised that they were wrecked almost, and so they didn't go into the World Cup buoyant. I think this year you have a Grand Slam under your belt. Munster have won the first trophy for a while. Leinster will have to lick their wounds a little, but like, Leinster had an extraordinary season that just didn't work at the very end. They're going to have to get over that pretty quickly. Yeah. But I think those players have the capacity. For me, the biggest bonus is that, and for Ireland, is that when I looked at the game last weekend, the Stormers played in the final. The Stormers are a really fine team, but they played a conservative style of play, pretty much the manner in which Munster have played for 5 years in semis and finals, and Munster were the ones who were trying to move the ball. That's unbelievably important for Ireland, because it means you've more strength and depth with players that are more comfortable playing with the ball, and you have a long period of time with your coaching panel, with Andy Farrell and his coaches, to try and bring that to the next level for a World Cup. I find that pretty exciting.
All right, Keith, we'll leave it there. Good stuff. Thanks a million.
Cheers, gents.
It's Keith Wood giving us a reaction to a massive victory for Munster and for Irish rugby at the weekend against Stormers in a full house in Cape Town. It's kind of perfect. We didn't get to talk to Keith there about it, and there's definitely been a view that this is such a weird mishmash of a league, and yet when it finishes like this, and if the Stormers had won, it would have been back-to-back South African victories for the first 2 seasons they were in. It was like, do we make an error here? But
there's no doubt the South Africans have injected a freshness into the URC, like something different. There was a lot of scepticism and raised eyebrows at the outset when it was announced, and these 12,000 mile round trips can't be good for anyone. But as you said, that turnaround from that South Africa A game and even the Champions Cup exit, like, they had some unbelievable performances in South Africa in the last number of weeks. So I think this idea that Leinster's defeat to La Rochelle is going to be a disaster for Ireland's World Cup hopes, and they'll all just remember that painful defeat and losing to a French team and all this, that's a load of crap. Like, it's in a similar fashion to, I think, Munster winning being an unbelievably good thing for Ireland's World Cup hopes. Munster winning and Leinster losing are completely separate. Like, by the time the World Cup rolls around, no one will even remember this. It'll be all in the distant past. It's gone.
I mean, I don't know. I think that, like,
they move on quickly, professional sports people.
It's not that. It's that, like, now the teams that have beaten the teams that have beaten Leinster and Ireland was that England team with the Giants. It was the Saracens, La Rochelle. Like, there's a pattern there, right? But some of the things that Leinster don't have, like Tadhg Byrne, for example, are really important in games like that, where you just have somebody who's winning you 3 or 4 penalties at key moments in the game. And if you stick Tadhg Byrne, I don't think Leinster would have lost those games if Tadhg Byrne had been playing for them. I just don't. And now I think Crowley's performance is like, he's shooting up like a rocket at exactly the right time for us.
Yeah, but
these are really important things.
Yeah, I agree with that, but to an extent. But I also think if it's 12 points apiece, Ireland against France in a World Cup massive game, and it's the last minute, if an Irish player who is from Leinster needs to use some pain from months ago to help them get over the line, or a Munster player needs to use a delight to get over the line.
Do you think they might look for a drop goal? Do you think James Gibbs-Bart might go order his 10 into the pot? I think he might. Do you know what I mean?
Maybe you learn things like that. That's practical stuff, at least.
All right, okay. No, Shane's not buying it this morning. We'll take whatever you're having on youtube.com/off the ball. I see I'm getting grief for my throwaway Monaghan remark.
Yeah,
you can't say
rightly
anything.
so.
You can't say anything.
You said Monaghan are irrelevant.
Just in the middle of the like,
just drew the Ulster champions.
Well, they shouldn't have been an amber. You said they shouldn't have been an amber.
Yeah, they're only an amber.
Irrelevant in the context of the amber.
Fair, okay.
Right,
recanted.
Right, Rob Tanner is with us, the Athletics Leicester City correspondent. Rob, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. I've had better mornings.
I was going to say, it's many trips to unheralded grounds next season coming your direction. I sympathise with you. It's very much off Broadway. What is as you begin to pick through the wreckage of what comes next? What does come next for Leicester City?
A fight to get back into the Premier League. I've been covering the club for 13 seasons now, so I've seen them in the Championship, and I've seen how that club's developed and grown enormously, the number of staff they employ there now, and I imagine they're all a little bit worried this morning. Obviously, we know what the financial implications are of relegation. This is a club that has flown very close to the sun, and they've got burnt, and they've come crashing down to earth because they've been so obsessed for a number of years with European qualification. They've chased the dream, and they just haven't seen relegation. They haven't factored it in to an equation, but it's a very real prospect for any club in the Premier League that aspires to challenge the Big Six, because it's a massive task to do that, to bridge that gap in terms of the revenues and the finances.
One of the things about being well run is that when you have an asset, you're supposed to cash in on it. But we're seeing somebody like Yuri Tielemans, who maybe would have been 35, 40, 45, 50, 60 million, depending on, what the market was like at the precise moment that he was coming to market. He's going to be gone for free, and a few others are going to be gone for now what looks like cup price deals. I'm not sure if they will end up being cup price deals. Maybe that the market will be hot enough for James Maddison. But from a financial perspective, what kind of state are the club in?
Well, the club will be able to survive. They've got King Power as their safety net. They've got a loan facility they can draw upon if need be. But obviously, they're going to take a massive financial hit. In terms of the player sales, I mean, it's always been their model to sell one asset every summer and then reinvest that money. Now, the key there is to reinvest it wisely. And what they haven't done over the last couple of years ago, because of COVID, they decided not to sell an asset because they didn't think the market would bring them enough value. In terms of Yuri Tielemans, there's been no takers for him over the last 2 years. I mean, it's been well documented that he's refusing to sign a new contract, but nobody's come in for him. I think he was aspiring for a big six club, but they've all looked at him and thought, well, there's something missing from his game, so we won't take him. And they turned down 2 offers from James Maddison last summer from Newcastle, the last one being around 32 million. And they obviously thought that wasn't value for him as an asset as well. You don't give your assets away. But obviously that means now they've got to a stage where they've got over £100 million worth of investment in players. They're all leaving for free because they're all out of contract. So they won't get anything for them. The likes of Charles Yunchu, Jose Perez and Yuri Tielemans. Maddison's still got a year. So they could, they will. They'll have to cash in on James Maddison this summer. Newcastle have retained their interest. And Harvey Barnes as well, who's had a good season in terms of the goal-scoring ranks. So there's business to be done, a lot of business, because that squad needs rebuilding this summer. They will probably have the biggest budget in the Championship for sure. So it's an all-out effort to get back into the Premier League.
Who will be the manager?
Well, we'll wait and see. Dean Smith, obviously, is the interim. He's set to meet with Top, have discussions with Top, but I personally believe they'll be looking elsewhere. They'll be trying to bring in somebody completely fresh, have an overhaul of things down at Seagrave, the training ground, and go again with renewed optimism. I think it's been so stale for the last 18 months or so down there, and it was only going in one direction. And I think they were hanging on and trying to stick with Brendan Rodgers because of the achievements previously. But I think for a lot of us, we could see that all the warning signs were there that this was a team that were heading for the trapdoor, and it was too late when they brought Dean Smith in for just the last 8 games, so he couldn't turn it around.
Do you feel rather there would be a regret at getting rid of Brendan Rodgers when they did?
Personally, no, I don't think so. I think there was a disconnect between him and some of his players. There was certainly a disconnect between the fan base and Brendan as well, despite his achievements previously. I think they will regret they didn't do it earlier and give Dean Smith more of an opportunity and John Terry and Craig Shakespeare as assistants as well, just to breathe new belief into this squad. I mean, this was a squad that Brendan had said publicly on more than one occasion that needed refreshing. A lot of the players had gone as far as they could with the club and he wanted to move them on. And then FFP constraints meant that he couldn't, so he had to try and get a tune out of them. And by that time, I think he had lost a lot of that dressing room. So I think they should have done it a lot earlier.
Has the defence been the main issue and concern? We were talking earlier in the show about the lack of clean sheets. I think the Newcastle game, the one previous to that, was back in November, so clearly that's an issue.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the number of soft goals they've given away all season, individual errors, giving the ball away in the wrong areas of the pitch, being vulnerable to the counter-attack, and sometimes the setup defensively as well. I mean, the 2 centre-backs have been left totally exposed game after game. I mean, the flip side of that is they're only the 3rd side ever to be relegated that scored over 50 goals in the Premier League. They scored 51. Goal scoring was never the problem. It was keeping it out of the other net that's been proven to be their downfall this season. And I don't think you can pick out individuals, but certainly the way the team was set up defensively, they were very frail and very open, and there was a massive gaps between the back line, the midfield, and the strikers. And you need to be a bit more compact in the Premier League. And this is what I mean about a bit of complacency. They thought they were this Cavaliers side that could go and play and score goals. Great, but you've got to defend. That's the basis. That's the foundation. And they lost that. They couldn't see that in the end.
You know the way you said relegation wasn't really part of the club's thinking. are we to assume that there are relegation clauses in the contracts of the players who are at least under contract, that they will be able to, that they did plan properly for those things to happen?
Yes, there will be relegation clauses in most of those contracts because they protect the club and the player. Obviously, the players that don't want to play in the Championship, there will be figures in there that will be triggered by other clubs if they want to come in for them. Likewise, if those players move on, it protects the club because they can't be taking huge wage bills into the Championship because the FFP constraints are even tighter in the Championship. So there will be, and there'll be other clauses as well, pay cuts for certain players as well. But the real big wage earners, they'll try and get off the books now, and I think there'll be a lot of interest in some of Leicester's players as well from other clubs as well, because individually, there are some talented players in that squad. It's a squad that shouldn't have been in this position. This is a squad that's finished in the top 10 for the last 5 years. 2 fifth-place finishes, nearly qualified for Champions League. Last year, I was returning from a European semi-final in Rome at the Stadio Olimpico, and now, there's the real prospect of going to Plymouth and all these clubs that we thought years ago we wouldn't see again for a while. But no, we're going back to the Championship.
What was the atmosphere like among the match-going fans, Rob, in the King Power? You looked at the scenes at Ellen Road, and certainly there was a toxic atmosphere there, probably because of the performance and result, especially on the last day. But Leicester got the job done on the final day and did what they had to do in getting the win over West Ham. We did see some scenes of some fisticuffs between some Leicester fans in the crowd at different points. Yeah. But was it a hostile atmosphere? Was it just accepting?
No, it wasn't hostile. It was very mixed. It was very strange, in fact. The atmosphere is the best I've experienced in the King Power for a long time, up until news filtered through that Everton had scored. Even Wout Faes' second goal, there was celebrations for that. But towards the end, when everybody sort of realised that there was going to be no comeback from Bournemouth to save them, there was a strange muted atmosphere. There were a little fisticuffs in the corner of the West Stand between a little group of fans, but at the final whistle there was boos and applause. There was a mix in the far corner by where the hardcore Union FS lads, they held up a banner and they were chanting for John Rudkin, the director of football, to be sacked. They still want some recrimination, and they still want to smell some blood in the hierarchy of the club. But I think a lot of people were just resigned to relegation, and stoically we're talking about getting straight back out. So it's a real mix. It was a real mix. It wasn't quite as toxic as Leeds.
So in terms of coming straight back up, let's assume that a new manager comes in. The parachute payments give you that one season where you have a big opportunity. Some of those players there'll be a market for, but not a huge market, and maybe they decide to keep them. Is somebody like Vardy, who might score a hat full of goals in his last season in the Championship, is he going to stick around? Or like his wages are big, so
yeah, his wages are big. He's the highest earner at the club. He's still got a year left on his contract. We will wait and see what Vardy plans to do. I know that he's been very committed to Leicester down the years. He's wanted a legacy. He wanted to. I mean, that's why he turned down Arsenal in 2016 to stay at Leicester and build this legacy. And he felt a sense of loyalty to the club because they took a chance on him when nobody else would from non-league. I wouldn't be surprised if I saw Jamie Vardy leading the line in the Championship next season for Leicester and trying to get them back, and then perhaps hanging up his boots at the end if he achieves that. So I wouldn't be surprised, but I think he'll probably have to take a massive pay cut.
So Vardy stays. Madison, he's gone, is he?
He'll be sold. Yeah, even if they'd stayed up, he would have been sold. He's their asset. They have to get back to that model of selling an asset and reinvesting it. So, and there are takers for James Maddison. He's a talent. He's just got into the England squad, so that he would have gone regardless. Now they've been relegated. Harvey Barnes is probably the other asset that they will sell off as well, and try and reinvest that, because this squad needs a huge amount of investment now. I mean, there's so many players leaving. There's 7 out of contract. There's another 8 going into the final year of their contracts, including Maddison and Vardy. So a lot of work needs to be done over the summer to get them ready. And of course, the Championship season starts early on the 5th of August. So they haven't got much time. They can't hang about if they're going to get a team out for that opening day. And before that, bizarrely, they're going off to Singapore and Bangkok to play Tottenham and Liverpool in a Premier League pre-season event. I mean, that's how much people didn't expect them to be in the Championship.
It was funny watching the players parading around the pitch after the match, Rob, and I was reading some Leicester City fan forums last night, and a lot of them talking about the players not playing for the badge this season, players being treated like superstars at this new training ground. Like, is there an element of that and an element of, I guess, distaste towards some of the players from some elements of the fan group as well?
Yeah, I mean, you've always got to be a little bit careful with fans forums because people go on there to vent. But yes, there is an element that they have too cosy a life at Seagrave. I mean, I've written in my article this morning in The Athletic about the change of atmosphere around the club when they moved from their old training ground at Beaver Drive to Seagrave. Seagrave is just incredible. They spent £100 million on it. It's got everything there that they could possibly want. The mantra is there can be no excuses. You know, they've got everything they need to succeed. But there was an element of the fact that they were getting a little bit spoilt. And there was efforts taken to stop the players from being spoiled. Brendan Rodgers removed table service in the club restaurant. They had to take their plates back up themselves and things like that. But at the old training ground, they all used to eat together. The youth team, under 23s, the staff, the office staff, they would all congregate in the little canteen they had there at various times. There would be club ambassador Alan Birchnell taking the mickey out of the players. There'd be banter flying everywhere. There was a family feel, a connection, camaraderie. They were all in it together. Down at Seagrave, the first team players sat at one half of the restaurant away from everybody else, and the under 23s, under 18s and the rest were in the other part of the restaurant. There was a disconnect, and I think that doesn't help when you want camaraderie, especially in a relegation battle.
Rob, great stuff. We'll leave it there. Thanks a million.
Thank you, guys.
It's Rob Tanner there from The Athletic talking about Leicester and their relegation and how quickly they might or be back up or otherwise. Some of your comments on the rugby, loads and loads. Peter Manny would have been the most important person for Leinster, says Tom F1 in Dublin 1. Congrats to Munster. Ross Byrne is a good player. He needs out from under Sexton's shadow, says Kieran O'Connor. He's had a whole season of it. I mean, did Sexton play 8 or 15 minutes this year in the Champions Cup? Jemison Gibson Park was the one going wide when Byrne was getting in the pocket as Pascal Jacob. Can we now accept Crowley is the Sexton replacement and not Byrne? Barbalatza 83. I was at the game. Amazing atmosphere, to be fair to the Stormers fans. Pitch was awful. Stormers fans very gracious in defeat. Bringing South African teams into the competition was a masterstroke. Remember we had the crap South African teams and now we have the good ones, and the difference that makes. As I said though, it's important that once we're able to go down there and duff them up, because if it had been the other way around, it would have been like, oh, yeah, this isn't great, is it?
On the Byrne and Crowley stuff, is this all a bit reactionary? Like Ross Byrne, Leinster lose a couple of games. If Ross Byrne had kicked a drop goal to win the Champions Cup last week, we'd all be singing his praises. We're like,
if my granny had balls, he'd be my granddad.
Well, of course, I know ifs and buts, but like, should we just be saying, it's Crowley's in there, number 2, 100% behind Sexton?
I think the most recent evidence we have is that Crowley kicked a drop goal into the same goals in Lansdowne Road, and then the following week played his best game in a final. That's the bit that's like, so look, I think that more than likely they're going to give Ross Byrne an opportunity because he's slightly ahead in their pecking order.
Yeah.
So
we also don't know the decision making behind that Leinster decision not to drop goal. Like, you can blame Ross Byrne for it, but it's someone else's call.
It's that whole success has many fathers, failure dies an orphan. Like, it's clearly a systems failure.
Yeah.
They thought they were going to be able to score the try. He kind of wanders back a little bit, but isn't forceful enough either to demand, and doesn't, it's in the maelstrom of the chaos of that moment, and they haven't been programmed to do it. Joe tweeted the link to Squid Rugby and his analysis of it. I don't know if you've seen the video, but it was 2017 was the last time that Ross Byrne had to kick a last minute drop goal, and he'd done it. So that's a long time, and maybe they just add a little wrinkle into practice where they start doing it a bit more, and maybe for Ireland it happens a bit more too. Anyway, it's 8:47. Cathal is with us. Good morning to you, Cathal.
How are you, lads? How's it going?
You're one of the few people who know what happened in Wexford Park at the weekend.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be there. What a game what a game. Had absolutely everything, and I think Wexford deserve an enormous amount of credit because they started really badly, conceded 2 early goals, and they were playing with a really strong breeze. And I thought Lee Chin actually stood up for Wexford yesterday. He's been their leader for a long number of years now, and yesterday he really came to the fore when they needed him. They got a point ahead at half time, then they nudged in front. They got to 4-13 to 2-13. Kilkenny managed to nudge in front then going into the last 10 minutes, and you're thinking, into that strong breeze, can Wexford sustain this and get themselves back into the lead? And they managed to do it. And all of this was happening obviously with Antrim doing really well in Mullingar, so it was a really fraught kind of atmosphere for
what was it like?
supporters.
Was it quiet, or was it like absolutely fever?
I thought it was quite feverish. We were over on the terrace side, and that was virtually full. There was some space in the stand on the far side, but there was a real big game feel to it from early morning. The traffic cones out on the road, and
the old starting the game 10 minutes late. It was mildly beneficial to know what was going on.
Yeah, I think they definitely knew it. Westmeath had nudged in front at one point in that game, but generally speaking, all the way through, I think Antrim kind of held the upper hand. But it's such a difficult one for teams that are involved in that situation, where you're really on the edge of a cliff, particularly in Wexford's point of view, where it was a huge possibility yesterday that they were going to be relegated, which would have been a huge story, and potential ramifications not just for this generation of Wexford hurlers, but Wexford hurlers in future generations as well, for the county to be playing in the Joe McDonagh, when they've only 4 years ago they won the Leinster Championship, came within a whisker of reaching the All-Ireland final. So they deserve an enormous amount of credit, and I think Darragh Egan and his management team obviously managed things really well during the week as well.
Was it the Wexford game where there was an 18-minute half-time period? It was kind of touched on in...
Yes, I think it was a lengthy enough half time, all right. A lot of people on the field and stuff like that, and then the throw-in was delayed, as Ger says, as well, with the crowd coming in before throw-in, so it was on a little bit later than the other games that threw in at 2 o'clock. But yeah, a really brilliant championship occasion. And then afterwards it was strange because obviously there's the initial elation and relief of getting the result, but then the realisation, well, we probably shouldn't have been in this position anyway, for them, and the fact that they've nothing else now to play for their season is finished, and they can look ahead to next year.
Are the hurling managers the thinnest skinned group of high profile individuals in sport? Almost every single one of them was complaining about something that somebody else had said about them in the press over the weekend.
Well, I think as a manager, you're probably always looking for some sort of an edge, aren't you?
You're not supposed to believe it.
That you can find somewhere.
Probably don't believe it, though.
Well, they all seem to be very sensitive about something that was said months and months and months and months and months back.
Who are you talking about specifically here?
Well, Davey was sensitive, right? He had to listen to a lot of bullshit being spoken about him. I'm misquoting him there, but that was the theme of it. Did Darragh Egan talk about stuff?
Yeah, well, they obviously took a lot of flack at Wexford after last week's result.
I mean, in fairness, you gave up a 17-point lead. Are people supposed to be going, you're amazing?
And he did admit that, and he admitted as much, I think.
He took the blame as well, Darragh Egan, after the match, didn't he? For the Westmeath result, he kind of accepted that.
Well, I think all the Wexford crew did accept that they really took the eye off the ball in that second half against Westmeath, and what a difference 7 days makes. I mean, Wexford Park yesterday was unrecognisable compared to
4-23 against Kilkenny.
Was Liam Cahill talking about something that had been said about the team? Oh, emotional baggage. That the Waterford team had emotional baggage. I think maybe Davey might have referenced that. And he was like, "There was no emotional baggage." So what are you talking about? That's it was so they're all watching, they're all listening to, and Limerick were afterwards saying, "Oh, we were being written off during the week." As far as I can remember, almost every conversation started with, "Well, you're not writing Limerick off." Literally the opposite of that. So I don't know. For big manly men, they're all a little bit sensitive sometimes. They're all a little bit wallflowery, aren't they?
That's just egos, isn't it? They all have egos. A lot of them played to a high level as well, so they still have egos, and I think that comes in when they hear someone else talking about their team.
I do like a little bit of spice. I mean, they're feuding brothers, right? They're all hurling people. Very quickly, anything else?
Well, plenty else going on in the football yesterday. Roscommon and Dublin playing out a 1-11 to 14 points draw at Croke Park. You've chatted through the Premier League. Porrick Harrington missed out on a major title last night in a playoff. He lost to Steve Stricker at the Senior PGA Championship. Both of those players finishing on 18 under par. And Leona Maguire lost in the semi-finals at the LPGA match play. And there's racing today at Ballinrobe. First off there at 4:30.
All right, Carl, good stuff. Thanks a million for that. A reminder, OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition edition is available now. Sarah Donovan joins us to look back at the weekend's hurling. Sarah, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm absolutely heartbroken. I'm absolutely heartbroken. We actually stopped in Ballylanders last night on the way home. Limerick country now to kind of drown our sorrows and watch the Sunday game, and we were treated to a rousing rendition of Horse Outside, which cheered us up a small bit. So kudos to the Limerick lads for giving us that.
Well, very good. I haven't seen them do that on the terraces yet. Maybe
they should.
I was going to say.
It was, look, I suppose last week we talked about the Munster final and this being a Munster final for Cork, and they gave it absolutely everything, their best performance of the year, scored 130, and it still wasn't enough.
Yeah. I don't know. Look, we'll have one sentence about this, but is the system fair that they're out now and that like we have Joe McDonough teams and the Dubs in and Cork are gone?
I think when they look back, they won one game. You know, they had 4 chances. Yesterday, they did very little wrong, but crucially, it was their retention of the puck outs, their sideline cuts, the retention of the frees. That's a work on for Cork for 2024. I think we can say that we're disappointed. We are, but the system is there, and three teams got out of the system and Cork didn't. You know. We can't, I suppose, keep pushing the blame somewhere else. We had 3 chances. We didn't take them.
Okay, let's talk about Limerick before we get into Cork, because they're now in a Munster final, which, you know, I think we all predicted at the start of the championship Limerick would be in the Munster final. We just didn't think they'd be squeaking through by the skin of their teeth. But there's the weather was good. It was all sunny. It's definitely summertime, and all of a sudden Limerick looked like they're close to being Limerick again.
Yeah, there was flashes of that in the game. I think Cork put a lot into the game and Limerick matched it like they've matched Tip. You know, like every game this season they've pressure applied and they've found a way. Interestingly, obviously Cian Lynch didn't come on till late, so Cathal O'Neill was given that big spot centre forward to work with, and you know, got a great goal in the first half. My sense though with Limerick is that they're actually not as strong from the bench as they have been in previous years, so there is potential, there's hope for other teams. They can be caught.
It feels open, I think, at the moment, as opposed to at the start of the year, where it felt like how close will anybody get to Limerick is kind of what we're looking for, which that's not the case. Like, Limerick could be beaten by any of the teams who've come out of Munster on a day in Croke Park, and they could also be beaten, you think, by Galway. Galway performed the way they did in the second half against the Dubs, and like Kilkenny, I think we just have to write off the performance against Wexford.
Well, look, they scored 5 goals against Wexford. The games yesterday were bananas, but interestingly, after the game, Henry Shefflin said, after the Dubs game, he said, look, we had no contests in Westmeath and Antrim. We came flat into this game. I'm misquoting him, but that's the essence of what he said. And I'd said to you guys last week, if Limerick were to come through as third place winners, they'd have met a Kilkenny or a Galway when they were only tepid, and it would have been a great time to meet them. So the warning signs are there for all teams. You know, unless you're going at full tilt, you can be caught.
Is discipline an issue? I think we've discussed discipline with Limerick already this season, Sarah, but I think half the outfield defence had been yellow carded by James Owens in the first half, and a couple of Patrick Horgan frees that just came from, again, indiscipline and giving away a stupid frees. So is that a potential problem going forward for them, do you think?
They have to clean it up. I think that's the Kyle Hayes, I suppose, free on Dara Fitz in the first half. There was more to that. You know, he potentially could have got a red card for that because of, I suppose, how aggressive he was going into it, and he did strike the player. So he was probably lucky to just get a yellow. Outside of that, there was a bit of fooling on the square with Aaron Gillan and Sean O'Donoghue, and to me it looks like, you know, Aaron Gillan was holding Sean as much as Sean was trying to defend the square, and they get a penalty out of it. Dermot Burns buries it, and all of a sudden Limerick are in the ascendancy. I think for Aaron Gillan, unfortunately, referees will be wise to it now for the next 2 or 3 games, and he probably won't get the same softness or soundness from referees, because they'll have seen what he's at, which is holding the hurley.
That battle between Gillan and O'Donoghue was pretty impressive to watch.
Oh, it was class, but you know what? Gillan, we said at the start of the season Limerick weren't ticking without him, and I firmly believe if if Kylie hadn't brought him back in after Christmas, Limerick wouldn't be remotely near where they are now. He is ticking every box for Limerick, and some of the scores he got yesterday, he just tips out for the ball. It's effortless.
It was a really brilliant contest, and in fairness, there were chances at both ends, and I understand how people will be upset with the penalty. It feels like it's a massive swing. Before Limerick get their first goal, Gillan actually hits the post with a kicked shot, which it's been, channeling his inner Nicky English from like the late 80s, early 90s. And it looked
that was all the soccer training there before Christmas.
Exactly,
remember?
That's what he was doing. Yeah, but Cork's inability to retain possession coming out of it actually gives Limerick the first goal after they had that kind of that was a big chance for Limerick, and it hits the post, and that's great. But then a minute later, it balls in the back of the net, and you're like, that could be. But they come back from it. That's the thing. Like, so flaky Cork are not flaky anymore.
No, but look, I suppose for me, and look, I had a great seat. I was in the open stand. I caught a lot of sun yesterday, and it's uncomfortable watching Cork play out from the back. They need to move the ball more quickly, and they got caught in possession yesterday, and they'll hate that. Like, it's there for all to see. He needed to move the ball away quicker, earlier, and William O'Donoghue turns him over. So from that, and then from the puck outs as well, I know Nash has spoken to you previously on the Friday about the chain. It's not just about the keeper, it's about the other players who are moving into line and moving into space. That broke down a lot for Cork yesterday. Cork will look back and say, God, there was crucial moments where we made tiny mistakes and they were punished so badly, whereas Limerick seemed to be able to recover more quickly.
It was the performance from Cork as well. I think you described it as the best in the championship so far, ironically, that they saved the best to last, and yet it just wasn't enough. But from a Cork perspective, albeit there'll be a bit of a post-mortem here, Sarah, but there's so many positives for them.
Yesterday, like that first 20 minutes for Cork, 11 shots, 11 scores, breathtaking stuff, and I suppose for the first time in a long time, they were actually matching Limerick physically. So Limerick were coming out from the back and Cork were taking them on. There was a great turnover with Dara Fitz or Rob Downey, and he gives the ball out to Tim O'Mahony, and Tim O'Mahony gets a sweet score. There's another one, Rob Downey shifts out to the sideline, gives a class pass to Luke Mead, and Luke Mead's there all on his own in space, gets a great score. So many stunning scores from Cork yesterday, and so accurate, and to score 130, and then you've got the under-20s coming up behind them. That under-20s team has some real quality in it, and I suppose for Pat Ryan now next year, it's about bringing up a couple of players. Like you've seen Adam Hogan into the Clare setup out of leaving cert and making a massive impact. I think Cork probably have to do that with a couple of younger players. And yesterday for me as well, if you looked at the Cork bench, it was all forwards. There was, I think, 3 defensive options. So Cork need to find backs because their defensive unit works so hard. If one of the lads yesterday had to go off injured, Cork were in trouble.
Okay, so Cork are gone. It's heartbreaking. Tipperary, after, I mean, again, one of the most outlandish performances that we've seen. They all they had to do was not lose by 5, and they couldn't even manage that. In the end, when they're mounting a comeback, it's they just know that, but they couldn't even do that. So I don't know how they respond. They'd made changes. Obviously, there were players injured who might be back by the time that the big games come back for them, but
so they're heading to Offaly. That's their next game. They're heading to Tullamore. I was talking to a tip man last night, and he was unsure whether he was going to go to Offaly to see the match. He was so disgusted after the final whistle yesterday. But crucially for them, look, Jason Ford, Jake Morris, Cathal Barrett, 3 fulcrum players that come back into that Tip setup. And I suppose when we were watching the match back on the Sunday game last night, Desi Hutchinson's goal is fortuitous, and Tip had been pushing to that point, and Hutchinson punishes kind of, I suppose, a bit of confusion with Rhys Shelley, and Tip again get murdered for the smallest mistakes. Do I think Tip are going to improve from here? Absolutely. I think it's probably the wake-up call that they needed.
So you don't take anything from any conclusions drawn from how Waterford set up against them for other teams set up against Tip. It's just, this is an aberration. It's a thing of itself, and they'll be different after they get over the Offaly game, which we assume they will. They'll be grand.
Look, last week they hurled a world ball against Limerick, and they had to come out 7 days later and find something, against Waterford. And like it or not, there was lots of history between Waterford and Liam Cahill, and there's obviously going to be a massive, I suppose, drive there to show him that he walked away from that team and what he walked away from. And the best way that you can show that to an old manager is to beat him.
Yeah,
and
soundly
beat him. And Cahill was very straightforward about that, and you were chatting beforehand about him speaking about the emotional baggage. Davy Fitz had quoted, basically said they're emotionally damaged from last season, and that obviously hurt Cahill, right? And that's he's speaking about that. But there's no question that Waterford team yesterday went out to show Cahill what he's given up, because I think they're surprised that he walked away.
So does it give Davy another year, do you think?
Unfortunately, yes.
Right, so you're not a Davy fan, but from a Waterford perspective, like that performance, if they performed like that, and like to Davy's point, like they should have beaten Limerick in the first game, and if they'd done that, they'd be going through. Do you know, like
we spoke in the league about how crazy the systems he was doing, trying to play. He was launching 40 players into the forward line on a puck out. He has the players, he has the quality, and he couldn't go route one, but he just doesn't seem to want to go route one. That's the frustration there.
To his credit on Billy Nolan, particularly, going to the sweeper centre-back role, that's an ingenious enough move in hindsight, but does that maybe come from the back room? Is that where I'm leaning towards this?
Yeah, look, I suppose the press box is a great place to get info, and a lot of lads in the press box yesterday knew that Peter Greeley, who's in the backroom team with Davy, is actually from Rowan Moore, and Billy Nolan played centre-back for Rowan Moore in 2021 in the county final, and he's actually played centre-back for Waterford as well in the fifth. So not the most shocking of places, to find him. And I suppose, we've said previously, Owen Murphy's played outfield for Kilkenny, Nicky Quaid's played outfield for Limerick in times past. Look, it's no more when we see the footballers outfield as well. I think it was a great move from Waterford yesterday. It was completely unexpected, and we were saying that Tyke de Burke's role was very hard to fill, and I suppose Kilm Lyons and Jack Fagan are different kinds of players, and it doesn't suit them to play that role. So to be able to bring Billy Nolan in was a masterstroke, whose ever idea it was.
We should talk briefly about Wexford and the situation there. Like I did feel a lot of sympathy. We see what Wexford are capable of when players are fit and they have the majority of their best players available for them, but they just don't have the strength and depth. So I don't know, maybe I'm being too soft on them, and actually they should be getting savaged for what's gone on this year when they do have many players in the prime of their career, and so whatever you need to do to make sure that they're going to be fit for championship, that's the job of the management team. So I don't know where you fall down on this, but there was a lot on the line for Wexford yesterday, and they didn't back down from it.
To be able to go to Kilkenny and get a result like that, especially with the start that Kilkenny got. Kilkenny were 8 points up. Owen Cody was having a field day, and then to be able to turn it around and come back up 7 points up in the second half, like magnificent stuff from Wexford. And actually Lee Chin had a grade 2 AC tear in the last 2 weeks, so he isn't even fully fit, and he puts in that performance. But I suppose crucially, Darragh Egan mentions the Wexford support. Despite last week and despite how horrendous it was, Wexford filled the stadium, massive support for the team, and the players stood up. But like, there's so much quality in that Wexford team. You say, lads, you can't go to Dublin and shoot 19 wides. You can't lose a 17-point lead against Westmeath. Psychologically, you have to be able to play for 70 minutes to give yourselves a chance, and they weren't. So they deserve to take, I suppose, it on the chin now and say, what are we going to do? But look, that Wexford under 20 team that's coming up behind that group has been in 2 Leinster finals. There is quality there, and it was crucial that they didn't go into the Joe McDonagh, because you have to blend these two teams and they have to stay at the top tier.
I do think that the fans arriving late to Wexford Park was actually a great thing for them to put the game back 10 minutes. So they've got to take. They were, when it turns out when they're unified, they can do great things. We'll leave it there for now. Good stuff, Sarah. Thanks a million.
Thanks, lads.
Sorry for your trouble. Yeah.
Well, the performance rankings and putting us in the red.
Yeah.
Did you need to do that?
Look, I mean,
not my call. Let me just wash my hands.
Sorry, hang on a second. This is is Don Logue and his Goblet of Minor Prestige or whatever. Like, they're now also rans. Like that, also running this year. I don't think it's fair. I actually think that there should be.
I'm quite shocked. You score 130. Like, these performance rankings are cat. Yeah, sorry lads, I'm giving it up this morning, and the summer's over, by the way. The kids shouldn't even finish school. They should go right through to September.
Not even June.
Feedback's always welcome. Feedback's always welcome, Sarah, on the performance rankings. We appreciate that.
Well, you've disappointed me so much this morning. I'm going back to Ballylanders. I'd say they're still there singing.
I'd say they are.
Good luck.
Thanks a million. Sarah Dunham giving us her thoughts there. Anthony Moyles is standing by. We're going to get to him in a moment. Here are some highlights for you on the OTB Podcast Network. Sunday pay-per-view with Cian Tracy and Shane Keegan alongside Joe Malloy, and there was GA reaction from Jamesy O'Connor on Limerick and Mossy Quinn on the Dubs as well. Subscribe to OTB GA wherever you get your podcasts. After the ad break, Anthony Moyles in studio. Here's a little bit of Jamesy O'Connor goodness speaking with Cathal Minogue. Catch the full review across our socials and on the OTB Podcast Network.
Yeah, well, Limerick had 12 different scorers. I mean, they shot 325 and had 14 wides, and some of those misses again were uncharacteristic. So again, they got their 40 shots off, and if they do that, they're going to win the games. It's as simple as that. But I think the most pleasing thing for Kylie and Kinnaird today will be the number of goal chances. I mean, they looked like, I think I counted 7. I mean, obviously they scored 3 goals, but Patrick Collins, I think at the 8th minute, pulled off a brilliant interception off Galan when it looked like all he had to do was put it into the back of the net. He came off his line, got a brilliant flick on it. Again, there was one that Glenn, a pass that Glenn overhit probably Tom Morrissey. Again, Cork had to take it off the line, and there was another bit of mess in the Cork full back line that Flanagan flashed it over the bar when again it could have been under the crossbar. So there was huge space in front of that Cork full back line, and Glenn and Flanagan I thought looked like they could get goals all day.
You're listening
to OTB AM.
OTB Rugby.
I do not see how a situation where Rog is going to be managing Ireland before Paulie.
Paul's next.
Yeah, in my eyes, I think that progression piece is all important. Who knows what's coming down the line? I would definitely suggest that Rog might have to hold on, and then I don't know necessarily if those two work as a unit.
Subscribe to the Rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
Counting down to more moments like this.
Top pocket goal!
#OTB Koigig. OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
10 minutes past 9. Anthony Moyles is with us. Anthony, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm great, Ger.
Yeah.
Sun is shining. I've had a few, very competitive underage fixtures to attend to over the weekend.
The gulags of South Meath.
Yes, I was tearing into it.
Yeah, a lot of little Nadia Comaneci's out there.
Plenty of them. Yeah, and listen, some won, some lost, but the people who lost, they'll hear about it this week. They'll feel it. They'll feel it in
that's
training
exactly
this
how
week.
it should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There you
go. Do you want to talk about this? Do you have strong feelings about this, or have we moved on?
It's probably kicked to death at this stage.
It is a little bit.
Yeah, I think both arguments are. I am absolutely 100% in agreement. You need the participation, you need all that, absolutely. And it was probably woe on me in the fact of I actually didn't think it went up to under 12. So there's loads of arguments for and against, but I think both can coexist.
Apology accepted.
Yeah.
Here we go. He's waiting for this moment.
Oh, look at this.
Sorry, hang on. What?
Yeah. No, I'm not. I like.
This is the thing. You only discovered this actually when you discover it for yourself, because you don't care about it until you care about it, and it's all that's on. So, like the fact that Go Games pre-exists and is the rule up to under 12, I think was news to people.
I'd say it was, yeah, absolutely. And I think that was the big... I knew, of course, I've an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, so the 8-year-old has been playing for the last few years out of nursery. And yes, there is the thing, of course, of the children know whether they won or lost. She was playing on Saturday. They got their handed to them, and you could see the disappointment and how kind of the energy was draining from them in the game. And it is difficult, even the silent sidelines. I find it difficult. I have to kind of walk away for a while. And all you want to do is encourage, but then, roaring and shouting. And even if you're encouraging players, there's so many facets of this, and then people will also say, well, what about the competitive kids? And you can understand that, like in gymnastics or in music or in different things, the person who practices the most generally gets better and therefore is rewarded for that. You know, you don't put little Jimmy, who hasn't touched the harmonica or the piano in 6 months, straight up to the top of the musical set when you want to do the recital.
Is little Jimmy more likely to practice the harmonica if a grown adult is screaming at them on the sideline?
100%.
You know?
No, and you know what? I honestly think, and this is a very difficult thing for the GA to police. I get that, and it is very difficult because it's even difficult to have the conversation. You know, you're the under-12s manager and you are a little bit overzealous.
Yeah.
I am the juvenile secretary and I have to pull you away.
Yeah.
Say in a small club, small town.
You're a volunteer.
You're a volunteer, and I'm saying to you, listen, Ger, you know, you need to calm it down a bit. And you're saying, what do you mean?
Yeah.
You know,
I'm only shouting at my child.
Yeah, this is the way I am. You know, it's okay. And then all of a sudden, well, sure, I'll pull Johnny off the team then, and Johnny goes off to the next club. So there's loads of it's nuanced. It's very tricky, but you would hope that adults could be adults here, right? Cop themselves on, actually just behave the way they should behave. And we've seen loads of it, by the way, because you then think of, well, if it's only to 12, should it not be 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18? In other words, you know, can the overzealous adults kind of sit there till under 12, but then they get an under 14, they're like, now, right, I can go bananas now.
My time.
Yeah.
You know,
it's my time to shine.
Yeah, and you see a lot of that, right? And you see those things, and it's disgusting on the pitch. It absolutely is. Like when you see that stuff going on between parents and players getting involved. Young lads are younger. Like, I mean, especially, you know, who at 14 think they're 18. Do you know what I mean? They think they're small men.
That's the one disadvantage of the silent sidelines is that you know, when you hear your parents or whatever family encouraging you from the sidelents as at 10, 11, 12, I know from my experience, you got a kick from that.
You did.
You know,
you did.
Obviously, you don't want the other element of it, and parents who are remarkably backward and screaming at their kids. So I don't know how you police it, but
I was walking past a soccer match the other day, and I don't know what age it was, between 8s and 10s, and the kid was taking a corner and was taking too long over the corner, and this just happened to be the opposition. I don't know who they were playing, and it was like, pass him. What the fuck you doing? And I'm like, oh my god, oh my god.
But you know, so I think there's a cultural thing in so I used to play a bit of soccer when I was younger as well, and there's definitely a cultural thing, I think. You know, I was talking to people who obviously do rugby, and there's the whole 3-pass rule, I think, at a certain age, you know, that you have to pass it 3 times. You know, so in other words, the big lad can't just bust his way through everyone and just, you know, get a try. So there's all those, so there's the small things within the game. And then there's the wider big question, which is the cultural thing of the soccer thing of answering the referee back, abusing the referee, having no respect for the referee, and then you switch to the rugby, which is all sir, yes sir, absolutely, don't do that, all this stuff. So I
have seen similar GA. I just saw the
sorry, I'm not saying just soccer.
Exactly, yeah.
Absolutely, sorry, loads in the GA, and the GA is most definitely getting involved in it too, and that's what I'm saying. So, you know, you go back to the gymnastics or the badminton or the tennis or whatever, even basketball. Does the referee in basketball get abused? I don't. Like, my wife is heavily involved in basketball. I don't hear it. They do blitzes all the time. They have MVPs, you know, so the little girl or the boy gets the MVP. They may not be the best player. They may actually be saying, you know what, you're the best trainer and you're coming every week. And there's different ways to reward them. There are different things, you know.
And I think the whole point about the stuff that came to them from the GA last week is like it's engineering on a grand scale, and then it's down to the individual clubs. Try and have a culture that actually everybody, because the whole point is you don't have a clue that the underage who's not that interested is actually going to not turn out to be the best player in the club, or to turn out to be the company secretary, or the person who marked the pitches, and all of these 100%. Are actually, it turns out, just as valuable as each other.
100%.
Let's talk about the games of the weekend.
Got away with that one.
Not bad.
I had the Dubs number 1 in my power rankings with Tommy a few weeks ago, but I'm not so sure.
Jesus, the power rankings. This is like, you know, it's like
myself now.
Yeah, it's like the Eurovision. It's up and down, and it's at the weekend. I say a lot of Dublin supporters, I'd say Desi Farrell, I'd say even some of the Dublin players are scratching their head saying, wow, where are we here? So I don't know if it was a set-up thing. They were obviously wary of Roscommon, right? They were wary of Burke and his innate ability to pick holes in your setup. okay, and I think he really does have that, okay. So he showed Mayo up, who has on last week's evidence. You're kind of going, Jesus, Mayo are right up there. Is this the year where they could do it? And he made them look pedestrian, and he kind of showed them up for all the frailties that they have, which they have gone about to try to change now. And I think it's a brilliant look. It is a fantastic system now, in that teams can learn so much about the opposition so quickly, and they're able to say. So what Roscommon did was, he said, okay, what we're not going to do what Louth did. We're not going to make this a shootout. We're not going to abandon players and attack you at pace. You turn us over and then hit us on the counter attack. When we get the ball, we'll control the ball. We'll control the ball and we'll move in pods up the pitch.
And get booed. It was great.
Yeah. And we leave two guys inside, because they have a great balance to their team. They've got their workers, they've got their midfielders, they've got their defence well set, but then they have forwards who can score, and 4 or 5 forwards who can score. They've the Murtas, they've the Smith, they've the lads who can take points.
A bench now as well.
Correct. They've a bench, and they've a lovely balance, as I say. So they never, I don't think they probably had a shot on goal. I must reach out, but I can't remember Cluxton make. So in other words, they were quite happy to say, no, you want to do that there? Well, we'll shoot from outside it. We'll work our little angles. We'll get Murtas onto the ball. We'll run at you. We'll try pick up a few frees, and we'll kick points. And then what we'll do is we'll try frustrate you to the far end, which they did for large parts of the game.
There was a Roscommon score towards the end of the first half. I don't know how long the possession period was, but
4.5 minutes, I think.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah,
but that sort of thing. I hate that word, blueprint of how to beat the Dubs. But keep the ball.
Let's just have a quick look at the Dublin against Derry. Scored 4 goals, but 8 points. Against Kildare, we said was 111. And now it's 111 again there yesterday. This is not the all singing, all dancing forward line. It's not a team who are going to score 18 or 19 points in a game now. Remember the magic number that Andy Moore had in his head was, I can't even remember, was it 18 or 20? But you get to that and you're going to go very close to beating the Dubs and being All Ireland champions. Now it's like you score 114 or 115 against the Dubs. You score 112 against the Dubs. You're in those games, particularly if you're Galway, Tyrone, Monaghan, Derry. Everybody's coming to Croke Park now thinking we're going to be the ones to stop this.
But I think it's as much on you as it is on them, if you get me. So when Andy Moran was talking about you have to score 180, I think it was of a time.
Mayo weren't setting up to.
Yeah, so it was the shootout. So in the shootout, I had to just get that little bit ahead of you. Whereas Roscommon came yesterday and said, we're not going to make this a shootout at all. And what we're going to see have you got better forwards than we have? Have you got a better system? Have you got a better midfield? And Dublin at the start, I think they fell into that trap. So they were kind of saying, okay, well, you can have the ball, and then when we get it back, we'll do our thing. Next thing, they find themselves 9-5 down or whatever it was, and they're kind of saying, well, actually, we're not really doing our thing here. So in the second half, there was a quite a significant up in pace and energy from them. It was funny. You could see Mick Fitzsimons at one stage, who was just like a man possessed at one stage. He got so aggravated. He was running around just chasing Roscommon players, nearly breaking the blueprint, because they went very one-on-one. And the thing about going one-on-one, like if I'm marking Shane and I am just concentrated on Shane, even if you spill the ball behind me, I'm not conscious of that. So you don't get to trap, you don't get to put 2-on-1 or 3-on-1. And you could see the start of the second half, Dublin tried to bring them down the sideline more and tried to get them more, and they got more success out of it. Now Roscommon showed great character to come back and equalise the game. And Roscommon are a very serious outfit. We said it at the start this year. They are horses for courses team. They're playing you, and that's what I'm saying. Burke, you've also got, of course, Ryan McHugh on the sideline, who well knows about playing Dublin and what way to set up. So I think Roscommon are. I still genuinely, okay, if they lose 1 or 2 forwards. But again, injuries. James McCarthy doesn't look great coming off the side. Davy Byrne, definitely, that knee was massively heavily strapped, and it looks like he definitely damaged when he got the little ankle breaker from Murta. He's in trouble, and again, it's going to be a war of attrition over these next 5 or 6 weeks.
I spoke to someone yesterday who was saying to me, "Oh, sure, the Dubs will come good still. They're peaking for the quarterfinals. Their fitness will get better over the next few weeks." But the more I see of them, the more I'm like, "But that I can't see that happening now." Like if you're not peaking now in the first game of this group phase at the end of May, start of June, you're in a bit of bother.
I think you're in a bit of bother. They definitely you could see the deficiency when they don't have McCaffrey on the field.
Yeah, he's a total game changer for them.
He is, because he's so direct. They don't have a player like him. They just don't. That is just 100%. They do not have a guy who can do what he does.
The similar ones are markable as opposed to him, who's unmarkable at that
Yes,
pace.
he is. And what he does is he causes that mayhem. So and also he lifts the energy straight away. So within the team, he lifts the energy straight away. You give him a ball, he just takes a man on and just goes past them. And next thing, everyone is on. So he is a big loss. I'd say, as we said the last day, that looked like a hamstring against Louth. He's obviously being minded. But the problem with that is it's a very tight window. And to take your point, Shane, like they're not on top of the ground. They're not a forward line. They're not ripping teams apart. They could have probably got one or two more goals in the end up, because the second half was much better, and they showed that real swashbuckling, running at you style, men off the shoulder, and good hand passes. But there's question marks still there, big time.
You wanted to talk about Armagh being lucky, like maybe that's exactly the game Armagh needed to come back.
I don't know, a lot of the certainly a lot of the provincial winners looked heavy in the opening round of the group phase. Armagh looked the same. They just looked there's a lot of hype about this Armagh team and how far they could or might go, but Westmeath should have won that match. Like, it's only for the last few minutes and Turbot gets the goal, whatever, led on, but like Armagh just showed very little throughout.
I thought they were blessed. Westmeath, where you could see Westmeath at the start were a little bit unsure of themselves, and then they kind of went, this is actually here for us if we just kick on here. And Armagh for me, I've played in these games. They might be in-house games or they might be challenge games where things aren't going great, and you are literally a whisker away from being a row between yourselves on the pitch. You could see annoyance, you could see frustration, fellas giving balls away, having a go at each other, and it was just kind of like, this is getting fraught here. Now they pulled it together at the end, and they got the scores what they needed. And to be fair to them, they were staring down the barrel of the gun, and they could have easily given up. But they didn't. And they are made of sterner stuff than that. But I think he has a big issue in his forward line. I just think there's no real balance. Like Turbot again wasn't on, comes on, gets a fortuitous goal. Mernon was started, but there's a lot of chopping and changing going on. Rian O'Neill, I don't think, although he's not really hitting the heights that, and I think they're still using them inside and pulling them outside. There just seems to be, we said this kind of earlier on, this analysis, paralysis by analysis. There is a bit of that going on, where I still think they're trying to find that balance, and they're questioning themselves a lot, and therefore I think the players are questioning themselves a lot.
And look, maybe what we're going to see is the teams who were heavy-legged, who were the best teams in their provinces, actually get the benefit of this game now and be a bit
possibly. Again, Westmeath kind of followed that blueprint of keeping the ball for as long as they could for different points, and then you get the ball to Luke Loughlin or to John Heslin, and invariably they're going to put the ball over the bar. So it's kind of, especially when you're away from home, and Westmeath had to go up to the athletic grounds, you keep the ball and then you work it into those forwards, but you just don't see those forwards, as you say, in the Armagh team. Mernon kicked a couple of lovely scores, I have to say, but they don't have those guys like Heslin or Loughlin who are consistent.
And almost nobody has a Heslin is the thing. And look, that's the benefit of him having a season in the Sam Maguires, that everybody goes, this guy is actually a generational talent. Okay, Monaghan, it's an 8-point switch from the previous Derry game. Do we give Derry a free pass because of the fact that they've just won an Ulster title and all that went with that, or is this like a massive surge towards Monaghan now that actually they've had the benefit of licking their wounds? And
not irrelevant.
You were talking about the point of the fitness being massively different, and they actually did specific fitness work in the 4 weeks that they had off, and that
just chatting to someone who's involved, like would be close to the camp yesterday, and they were saying that fitness has been a focus in the last 4 weeks. The Derry game has really taught them that they were far behind where Derry were on fitness, and certainly when you look at the team selection yesterday, McManus had a knock, so that was I guess he couldn't play the full game regardless, but McCarran not starting, and bringing in Shane Carey and Ryan McInnesby as well back from Australia, there was clearly a target of pace, and it just seemed to work. They certainly learned from that previous Derry match.
Well, it's funny, I think there's a kind of a misnomer that can be, we're going to concentrate on fitness for the next 3 to 4 weeks. I don't know how. Of course, you can get fitter, right? But what it does is it plants a seed in your head. I am fitter. I am faster. what do you know? Exactly. So, and then it's all about the people on the pitch. And they most definitely, and if you remember from the last day, do you remember, I think, I can't remember who got the goal. Was it McCluskey who got the goal? Where he stood up, McManus.
Yeah.
Monaghan fell into the trap the last day against Derry big time. So they brought men back. They tried to crowd the area. They brought the wrong men back. Derry looked for the mismatch, which they always do. And even in this game, they did it. And then they took it on. So that McManus, that goal specifically, Monaghan this time said, we're not going to create those mismatches. We're going to put pace all over the pitch, and we're actually going to do the far end. And where they did what Derry do a lot is they brought loads of bodies into their forward line, which of course meant Derry men had to follow those defend men. So the last day they left McManus in on his own. So Derry were like, that's fine, we'll just stick a couple of fellas in front of him and then we'll squeeze you all around out the middle. This time they brought fellas in, so that meant there was spaces then in the pockets for McCarthy to come up and just kick some outrageous points. And so they were able to find the pockets of space then, Ger. And what it means is, again, it goes back to what I was saying. Teams are learning so much from, and then there's so much thinking going on, and there's so much tactical nuance going on the sideline. It's brilliant to see, even from the kickouts. Like there was some serious high-risk strategy kickouts yesterday. Beggin's 2 scores were absolutely sublime. Monaghan are definitely, I think they'll probably end up playing Derry another 3 times this year, probably. It's going, just need to go on and on and on. But they're thereabouts. Derry, I think there is probably something you will find this heavy leg that we've just spoken about. It's the old 5 weeks off, he who prepares, like who is our, you can see the freshness in Westmeath, you can definitely see the freshness in Mayo last week. When you have that break, you're able to get everyone 100% fit, you're able to work on what you like. Now, after a couple of games with those people, will it start to, and then it's all the squad, it's all about the squad, and Derry's squad, again, I think forward wise, it's lacking a bit. Like Wigan, they're going to the well of Wigan a lot. They're going to that well a lot.
And he kicked 9 points at the weekend, but only 2 from play. Wigan, a lot of frees. But I actually think this whole naming the panel and the team on the Friday, I think the GA now have this diktat where you have to name the team. I think Monaghan's selection threw Derry off a little bit, because they're looking at the team, they're like, right, McManus isn't named, but McCarron is named. So I think Chrissy McCaig is one of these players who picks up that nasty little forward who can score. So I think in Chrissy McCaig's head, probably before the match, he was preparing for Jack McCarron. And then all of a sudden, just before throw in, Monaghan are like, well, no, Jack McCarron's not starting, Shane Carey's in. They have Carl Gallagher named, who's a young lad at number 8 for Monaghan in the midfield. But what Carl Gallagher did was he just went up to full forward for the throw up, and Christie picked him up, and Carl ended up having a great game on
but he came for loads of kickouts.
So that sort of thing, Christie was probably preparing for one player and ends up he's not even there. So there's probably something in that selections can throw teams.
And we're in a bit of a weird sprint now for the next few weeks, where if you don't automatically win your table, you end up having to play likely 3 weeks in a row, which again, on the face of it seems like, well, that's not big a deal, but Dublin lost at least 1 and potentially 2 players, and then if they lose 2 more the next week, all of a sudden it feels really open. And I actually I'm coming back to everybody who was talking about Galway. I wasn't quite sure, but the Galway Tyrone victory, like, that's really important for them. That's a side who could have caused them a lot of difficulty, did cause them a lot of difficulty, and they managed the probably because it wasn't too high against Sligo. It was like, great, we have better things to be doing.
But the importance of that the importance of the whole structure. It's like, we give out so much about structures, right? Like, this is that. Look at what was it at the weekend? A draw, and a point, and 2 points. Cork Loud. So it was both. Everyone was going hell for leather,
and Cork feeling pretty good about life heading into a game against Kerry, which has not happened in a long time.
Also, Derry have their home game done now. So next weekend Derry go to Ballybuffet, which is, look, regardless of Donegal's troubles, Donegal have a good record in Ballybuffet. Monaghan have Clare coming up to Clonus. So if Monaghan,
and they've had a break,
as well. So look, next weekend tells all.
And sorry, in the other one, it's Westmeath have Galway at home, so you'd still expect Galway to win that, and if Galway win that, then they'll have 4 points. But Tyrone are playing Armagh. No.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. But Westmeath will be buoyed by that performance, Ger. You know, I can guarantee you know the way all these different counties, sure, Jesus, we never feared. I can imagine Westmeath saying, well, we never feared Galway coming up the road. Like, it's so, it's like, it is fantastic for that. And it does go back down to the energy, the ability to learn, and having that, as you say, when you finish top, you get that time, but you also get that time then to analyse the opposition and analyse what's potentially coming on as management teams. So you're saying, right, with the permutations of this is who we will get. You're able to go to the games, you're able to see it up front, close and personal. So it's look, it's great. And you know, I thought, albeit people will give out saying, oh Jesus, GAA, you know, it's back and forth and it's holding on to the ball, it's 6.5 or 7 minutes for us coming. There's still brilliant stuff in that.
Well,
you know?
It's up to the opposition to do something different.
Get the ball back.
The rules of engagement, everybody knows what they are.
Yeah.
Kildare, any chance against Dublin in Nolan Park?
Big time. Again, Glenn Ryan learnt from last year's Leinster final, where they were so open at the backdoor cuts all over the place, you know, fellas not running, fellas being cut out. It was interesting to see Roscommon, the way they put 2 players down the sideline to stop that backdoor cut, which Dublin do. So they had a man on the man, and then they brought another guy into the space. So the backdoor cut was completely gone. They took one of their main weapons away. Very good learnings from it. Kildare will do the same. Kildare was set up exactly the same. Nolan Park's a big pitch now, so you know, you're not like you're going into a provincial small pitch, so it's big, it's bigger than Newbridge, but that'll be okay for Kildare.
Yeah.
And Kildare still have forwards there. Kildare have forwards who can score and big men who can take the ball on. So Davy Byrne's gone. Right, Mick Fitzsimons has been drafted back in. McCaffrey won't be right. James McCarthy may not be right.
Now or never, kids.
Now or never.
Right, good stuff. Anthony, thanks very much for that. OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. On tomorrow's programme, Shane's in the hot seat alongside Johnny Ward, Tommy Rooney's football power rankings. I'm sad to be missing that. Jenny Claffey on the start of the French Open, Jasmine Baba and Dortmund's massive bottle job, which we didn't speak about, which we should about. They should definitely have been in the red. Derval O'Rourke, plenty more besides. Right now, the very best of the Sunday paper review. Have a marvellous Monday.
But we are going through the Sunday papers. Shane Keegan, Cove Rollers manager, and Keane Tracy, the Irish Independent, here in studio. Let's turn to, I guess, one of those kind of topics which bubbles up and captures the imagination for a week. And it was about the extent to which there should be competition at underage level in GAA. So this all came, by the way, on the back of an email from the GAA just reminding people of the status quo. This is not a new idea introduced, but it felt like it was being introduced the way it was discussed. So we're talking here about the Go Games in GAA, whereby so since the idea, writes Michael Foley, was first floated at a GAA coaching conference in 2004, any number of reports and analysis have shown exactly the impact. Surveys before 2004 showed huge numbers of children and teenagers dropping out of Gaelic games when matches were played as 15-a-side with subs and all the trappings of championship play. In 2013, one piece of research from the GAA showed a 30% increase in membership at the Go Games age levels alone. So what happens at this age group is that all children up to under 12s play small-sided games. Everyone gets equal playing time. No scores are published. There are no competitions or trophies. Every last shred of research across sports, as Mick Foley tells you, this approach works. And I suppose he's not overly in agreement with the sense that there's this idea that kids need to be exposed quickly to the reality of winning and losing as some kind of essential character-building experience before many of them are even clear on the situation with Santa Claus. What are we preparing them for exactly? War? He asks. Go Games, he says, also offers a low-pressure environment for coaches to get a feel for how to organise teams, etc. Mentions the Dubs generation, because Dublin, one of the first counties to really buy into this way of doing things. He says the Kilkenny-McCaffrey generation, giving their kids more touches of the ball, more opportunities to develop their decision-making faculties, more chances to improve their skills, and tons more games, has worked out fairly well for them. He says if coaches get frustrated with the lack of focus and competition and winning, so what? It's not about them. Discuss. I deliberately didn't want to know either of your opinions before we did this on air, hoping for a good old-fashioned row.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a chat outside before coming in. I have found that
you were very involved in coaching underage teams.
Well, it's my full-time day job is as a coach for Leinster GAA, Joe, and as part of that day job, I've come straight in here from an under-8 festival of football out in Kilmacud.
GAA employee agrees with GAA policy.
Yeah, shock horror. But
that's the first job for you there, Keane.
Yeah, thanks, one up already. I'm going to be able to listen. I'm going to be able to back this up without a doubt. Yeah, I suppose anytime there is a rule change in any walk of life, regardless of the sport, if we change the speed limits on the road in a certain area, why is there a rule change on anything? There's a rule change on anything to change people's behaviours. All right. So why is this rule here? Like, this is the whole premise of it from the start. Is this rule is not here to change the behaviours of the people playing the game. It's absolutely not there to change the behaviours of the people playing the game. It is 100% there to change the behaviours of the parents and the coaches on the sideline at the games. I've heard the argument made this week elsewhere that, but sure, if kids have a game on the lawn at the front of their estate, or if kids have a game in the schoolyard, they'll keep the score. They'll be competitive. They'll knock lumps out of each other. They won't go non-competitive. That is because they have the perfect environment for competition, i.e. there are no parents and coaches interfering and ruining it on them. Like, we have to make it a competitive environment for kids to play a match, we need to remove the competitiveness from their coaches and from their parents. Once you do that, that allows the kids to be extremely competitive. That under-8 blitz this morning, Joe, that's still going on, I'll be tipping out for the tail end of it when we're finished here, is non-competitive. The recent scoreline's been kept. I'll come back to that, a little bit of a caveat on that, right? The recent scorine's been kept necessarily. They're not announcing which team won, which team lost at the end of every game. There is no league table. I think there's like 8 groups of 4 or something like that is the way they have it set up. It's an unbelievable tournament out there, in fairness to them. They're knocking lumps out of each other out there all morning. All right, every kid has a fair idea of whether they've won or lost at the end of it, without a doubt, and yet that is supposed to be non-competitive. I would challenge anybody to go out and tell me that if they're out in UCD this morning watching what's going on out there, that it's an airy fairy, dreamland where nobody cares whether they win or lose, or nobody's tackling because the score isn't being kept.
Is the resultant behaviour of parents and coaches better?
A million times better, Joe. Because, okay, as the coach, as the parent, you're still keeping an eye to see whether your team has won or lost, and you still know, but you just look like a wally now if you're talking about it. Like, if you're, oh yes, we won and we came away from there will be nobody announced as the winner out there today, right? If there was, everybody's focus on the sideline shifts, okay? If the results are going to be published online, we don't want our Portlaoise team being seen to have come bottom of a group, so therefore don't put on Johnny because we need to win this one, we need to stay on the right side of this one. Don't let Johnny off. We have an easier game coming in the next game. We might be able to get Johnny on the field in the next one. Let's leave him there for this one. And how we communicate to the players, next ball, we have to win the next ball, because we don't want it up online that we finished bottom of a group. Like, it completely alters behaviour. Completely. Yes, you might end up winning all of your games out there today, and technically that you were one of the best teams out there, but you can't go back to the lads in the pub this evening and talk about winning a tournament where there was no winners in the tournament, or where we're not keeping that. You just look stupid then. So I think it does completely change the dynamic. I think some of the points that Michael makes within it are brilliant. Like, the Go Games is fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm a bit of a mixed breed in that my own young fella, so his club, Bursley Cotton, we had Go Games yesterday morning against Castletown over in Laois, and again, it was just an outstanding morning. And the referees have learned to be brilliantly diplomatic in this. I'm pretty sure yesterday's referee somehow managed to send the Castletown lads away thinking they had won, and sent the Bursley Cotton lads away thinking they had won as well, by kind of just being cute about it. Yeah, it was a tight one, but and you're praising both teams. It's not give me the argument against it, is what I keep saying. Give me the argument against it.
Keane, this woke world has gone mad.
No, we probably overhyped our disagreement, even though I don't even think it was a disagreement, because I'm not out in a weekend watching these underage games, and I'm not seeing the behaviour of parents on the side of the pitch, so I totally accept Shane's point. All I can do is compare it to my own experiences when I was growing up, and I can tell you now that I stopped playing a particular sport because there was just very little to no competitiveness in it. We were told we'd be playing competitive games against this team, that team. You'd rock up on a Sunday morning and we were training again. At the time I was probably playing 4 or 5 sports, so I just sacked off that sport. I left it off. I just lost interest in it because there was no competitiveness. Again, this is just me. I much preferred to go and play the other sports that there was something tangible there, and this is I was only 10 or 11 now, by the way, when
you were a winner.
No, but not necessarily winner, but
I know.
By default, I'm a loser.
But the idea that the referee sends both teams home and they both think they're in just leaves me a bit cold. If I'm being honest, I don't know if I'm too cynical. And again, I don't have kids where I understand the argument that the participation is really, really important, and you don't want to see, because we've all been on teams over the years where we've seen people who don't get as much game time, and that's I'm not for that whatsoever. But the notion where everyone wins and we all go home happy leaves me a bit cold. And like I said, I would worry, and again, I don't have anything to back this up, but I can only compare it to myself. Is there not a fear that girls and boys will be turned off playing GA and they'd rather go play soccer now, or they go play rugby or something else which has a bit more of an age? Because certainly that's what I did, and that's all I can compare it to, I think.
Yeah,
because we don't, funny in this debate for obvious reasons, we're not hearing from the kids. Based on your characterization of what you're seeing, Shane, they're still into it just as much. They're not looking around going, well, what's the point if we're all winners?
And maybe that example I gave yesterday where Brian managed to make both teams think they'd won, it was just a really, really close game, if that makes sense, and both really want to know where they won, but by and large they will know who won and who lost.
Kids are keeping score in every aspect of their life. Socially they're keeping score, academically they're keeping score, they know what's what. Enda McGinley, I thought, had a very interesting piece on the RT website, just to give it a counterpoint. 3-time All-Ireland winner with Tyrone, deep thinker, smart fella. He was reminiscing about how the Knockmany Cup, which he won in primary school, is one of the highlights of his career. And fast forward 30 years later, and he went to see his son compete, and now his daughter's competing, and he told her that this could be the last one that there'll ever be, and she's in disbelief. And so he writes, how something that was a real highlight for generations is now a danger to children having fun and enjoying their game is a tough one to explain. And he says at the coaching point, find me one coach at under 10 level who is focused on winning trophies, and I'll find you an equivalent 20 with sense, who are just trying to develop the kids under their charge as best they can. And he suggests, I imagine this, but a middle ground. He was wondering if maybe there's an argument to have 3 or 4 or 5 blitzes across the year where you can really prep for them, and they're a bit of a highlight where you go and actually play in a competition of sorts. And then for the other 30-40 weeks of the year, it's that lovely non-competitive environment, but you still get a taste. Jeez, we won the trophy. Wasn't that one of the best days of our young lives? And we had ice cream afterwards.
I think that's a great shout, personally. Again, not being on the ground and not knowing it, I think the idea that you can have the go games, because I'm actually not totally against that whatsoever, like I said, because if it means more boys and girls are getting to play, then that's brilliant. But I think that's a great idea to have, and maybe everyone doesn't want to enter into that kind of thing, but I guarantee you, and you'll definitely know, Shane, there's plenty of lads and girls there who want that competitive edge as well.
Yeah, and look, they're all, like I say, they're all out there this morning. They will trudge off the field really annoyed and disappointed if they have been bet in their heads, because they know if they're bet or not. I suppose, there's definitely a bit of a caveat in this whole thing, in that I'm not hearing any talk of there being changes coming to Munster, and coming to Munster is dog eat dog. It really, really is, and it's technically the same age group. What age are you when you're in 6th class? 12, thereabouts. And we've the coming to Munster finals this week in Laois, and they will be taken massively seriously by everybody involved. So that definitely provides an outlet. Is it kind of suiting themselves to allow competition in some areas and not in others? Look, I suppose, to try and back up my own argument, I would contrast it against the situation we had a couple of weeks ago, Joe, whereby with my local soccer team, our under 11 soccer team had a cup semi-final which went to penalties. Now they won it, but it only made you feel slightly worse for the opposition than you would have felt for your own team. Like 10, 11, like for starters, as they were walking up to take the penalties, they were nearly crying. Like they're 10 and 11 and they're trying to get into a cup final, and it's all going to come down to whether or not they score this penalty.
I know, it's so exciting.
As a 12-year-old who missed a penalty in a county semi-final, I still haven't recovered from it. But it can also be the making of you. One interesting point that I would wonder, and again I bow to your expertise on this, is there any fear, and I know we're talking about very young kids here, but is there any fear of if the lack of competition is driven out of it, that players aren't quite then getting the same level once they hit into the 12, 13 that they would have got if the competition was fierce, and all of a sudden then you're reducing the potential of certain players? I don't know, it could be wide with that, but I suppose
I'm coloured here because my opinion on the whole thing is that there is no alteration to the competition for the players. I see no difference between how competitive the players are in a game where mammy and daddy and coach are keeping the score, as against how competitive they are in a game where mammy and daddy and coach aren't keeping the score.
Well, that's the point then.
100% as competitive in both situations.
It sounds like it's all working fine and parents just need to accept it. Listening to you.
And like, who did you say it was? McGinley, was it?
Enda McGinley.
Enda McGinley's comments.
Yeah.
I see where he's coming from, and I do like the idea that you've thrown out there about the blitz thing. I think there's probably still a place to try and retain, but I think he's been fairly kind on the 1:20 ratio there now. Now I do think the ultra competitive ones are in the minority. Thankfully, I think they were probably in the majority, probably still up till about 5 years ago. Now, because of the change of mindset, thankfully around the whole thing everywhere across sport, I think they're now in the minority, but I would say more in minority being 25% to 75%, not 1:20.
And just one last thought for me then. So this is a fairly blunt instrument to try and curb the behaviour of coaches and parents. And so that works up until they're 12. I mean, in my experience of playing at 13, 14, 15 and 16, 17, what's coming around the corner here...
all hell still breaks loose.
...is hell breaking loose.
Yeah.
So I wonder, if participation is key, do the GAA and all sports maybe need to think about rules whereby referee keeps track and every team all the way up until 17s has to empty the bench, for instance? Because I would suspect that the only danger with go games is that it works lovely, but I mean, like from a minute past midnight at under 13 level, then like the Pep Guardiolas on the sideline are coming out. And so then little Johnny's been told, this is actually serious now, Johnny. We've gone from no competition to we are in a competition. This is new to all of us. I'm in my first season as manager. I want us to do well. You're not playing. And that only gets worse 14, 15, 16. And what's more, that is the age group where there's the most dropout. So I was even suggesting we were chatting on Thursday and I was saying, like, I get it. I don't have a problem with it. And listening to you, I have even less of a problem with it. It sounds like absolutely a way to go, even though I really enjoyed winning and losing as a 10-year-old. It didn't affect me, I don't think. I only cry 2 to 3 times a night. But I did wonder if like some rule where it starts getting very competitive, like I said, and I know referees have enough to do, but some mechanism whereby participation is hopefully encouraged by a guaranteeing of emptying of benches with at least 20 minutes to go.
So look, there are areas where the FAI are ahead of the GAA, there are areas where GAA are ahead of the FAI, right? So don't anybody think this is me saying, oh, soccer is ahead of the GAA, right? But there's 2 things that the FAI have got very, very right at the moment. And one is, so in the under 14 League of Ireland, okay, instead of 2 halves, there's now 3 thirds, all right? And the particular reason around this mechanism is that the rule in place is all players must play a third of the game.
Yeah, great.
Who enforces that?
The coaches are supposed to enforce it, but you can be, having been at Underage League of Ireland games, you can be pretty sure there'll be at least one FAI official at almost every League of Ireland game. The local FAI.
They're not sent along though to make sure that Johnny is getting his game. Like, I'm just curious.
Keep an eye out. They're told to keep an eye out.
Very progressive.
It's very progressive, Joe. Yeah. And the other one, arguably even more progressive, which I think would definitely take a bit longer to maybe be considered maybe within the GAA, is overage players are allowed to play down. So basically, you're told at the start of the season. So let's say teams have just finished under 15 season. Okay, they're now going to jump from under 15 to under 17. Right? You've got a guy who's not underage to play under 15 next year. Technically, is really good player, but he's very small. He's still slight. He hasn't filled out yet. You're going to release him because he's not big enough and bold enough to look after himself in under 17. No, the FAI are saying to you, we know he's overage, but we're going to let you play him anyway.
Love that. It's great.
Yeah. You know, and I think there's massive scope for that within
like
GA
in
circles
New Zealand,
as well.
where they'll designate categories on weight as opposed
to. And you have to do it within the spirit of the rule. Do you know what I mean? You can't play an overage guy who's 2 foot taller than everybody else. You know, again, within reason, case by case, be sensible on it. But I think that's another thing that we could definitely look to try and bring along here.
It sounds, I'm going to go to Croke Park now in just 1 second. I would say on the whole, though, having listened to a lot of the conversations this week and comparing it with my own experience 20 years ago, it sounds like we're in such a better place.
No doubt.
It's so much more holistic, it's so much more encouraging, it's less do or die, it's less vicarious living through the kids. Like, honestly, it was the killing field in my day.
Yeah.
And the coaches were great. Just it was all well-meaning, but we really wanted to win as a club.
We had matches
so much
stopped.
more enlightened.
We had matches stopped while I was growing up because parents and stuff were running on for soccer. Like I've been in those situations.
Oh yeah,
as well.
I was talking about soccer in Ghana. Like the fights were off the charts at like 13, 14.
The whole atmosphere yesterday morning at the Go games, this morning out of Kilmacud Club Crokes, it's a fantastic environment to be around. It is. It can only nourish personality and talent, which is what we're all after.
That is why they're going to grow up to be a soft generation. I'm joking. No, it does sound like we're in a much better place, which is great.
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.